Sure.
All right, I'll call this public meeting to order. I want to welcome everyone to this public meeting and also to our new emergency services building. We moved to this location to accommodate our COVID operational plan for this event. I'm Jill Burridge, a counselor and the chair of Planning, Development and Heritage. This is our first for our town as we're broadcasting this public meeting live via the town's Facebook page, and the recorded meeting will be also available on the town's YouTube channel after this meeting is finished. In the room we have residents, presenters, town council, and our mayor. Up here with me, our planning staff, Kevin Reynolds, our town planner, Blaine Yatabi, are also with us. We have asked the 5 resident planning committee members to watch and listen from their homes this evening to ensure there was an adequate seats available for residents in this room tonight. Just a few housekeeping items. Washrooms, if you need them, are out to the right. There's a hand washing station, and we ask that one person go in at a time. Cell phones, I'll get you to turn to silent. And at the end of the meeting, you'll be using this exit door because we have another public meeting in after this, so we're going to bring them in the same way, and we're going to have you guys leave through that door just to keep everything nice and tight and not risk any more exposure, I guess you would call it. Now, as far as questions go tonight, in-house questions will be like it always has been. Your microphone is here, and we're going to ask you to come up there. We ask you to come up, speak clearly, so our virtual attendees can hear what's going on. And as always, we ask you to state your name and address. And the one other thing is I'll ask you to address me as a chair and then with your question, and then I'll delegate that question to who should be answering that. And just for those in here as well, we do have slips for the microphone, so when you come up, ask your question, that's then going to be sterilized. That slip will be taken off for the next person just to as a safety measure. So that's that. For those of you out there in Facebook Live, we're going to be monitoring the page, and any online questions will be emailed to me here, and I will ask them, make sure that they're asked. There is going to be a delay, so we ask for your patience. I don't know how long that delay is. 40 seconds? 30 seconds. So we just ask for your patience there. Also on the live, we do want you to indicate where you live so we know which item on the agenda your question pertains to. And only questions will be brought forward from social media that relate to items being discussed tonight and that have not already been asked or addressed. And then also for everyone involved tonight, if you want to comment formally on anything from tonight's meeting, the town's going to accept written responses provided to the planning department by email until Wednesday, July 22nd. And please note that if you're on social media, any comments that are put on a social media platform are not captured as a formal written response. We would ask you to formally submit those responses to the planning department. With that, I think I covered everything. I'm going to pass this over to our chair, or to Kevin here, our Director of Planning, to go through the rezoning application that we're here tonight to discuss.
Thank you, Councillor Burge. One other housekeeping item: when we do have people attend to the mic, if you could remove your mask just at the mic, put it back on when you're going back to your seat, just so anybody that's watching online can see your lips in case they have any trouble hearing you. So the proposal that we're here for tonight, this is a rezoning application from Redden Meadows, Landfest Company Limited, to rezone parcel numbers 106-1175, 106-1167, and 329-011, approximately 14.01 acres in total, from the low-density residential zone to the planned unit residential zone for the purpose of being able to develop a residential subdivision. The original proposal had a special permitted use with an apartment building in it. That is not in the current application that's being presented here this evening. A couple of notes of where we are or what brought us here. So this application started originally last fall. We placed 2 rezoning signs on the property on November 18th, 2019. We had the original public meeting November 27th, 2019. We have sent out 143 notification letters out. We sent them out March 12th, and unfortunately that meeting was canceled, as you all are aware, due to the COVID restrictions that were put in place. So this is the rescheduled date for that meeting. Those second group of letters went out on June 30th. March 25th, the meeting was canceled. So we advertised in the Guardian, which we are required to do, on March 14th, which was for the March 25th meeting, and again on July 4th, which was for this evening's meeting. The meeting has also been put on our website, Facebook, Twitter, and our Stratford e-news to ensure that everybody was aware that the meeting was being held. We do appreciate people coming and attending. We understand this is difficult, but there's been a lot of work put into it to try and ensure we reach every avenue and people have every opportunity to present their comments. So I'll go through just quickly the permitted uses within the 2 zones. Within the R1 zone, the as of right permitted uses are single dwellings, secondary dwelling units, home occupations, active and passive recreation, accessory buildings, private garages, and general agricultural uses. As a conditional use, you can have duplexes or semi-detached dwellings up to 20% of the units within a block. A conditional use requires conditional approval from council. And then as a special permitted use, which would require a public meeting, you can have duplex or semi-detached dwellings up to 40% of the units in a block. Neighborhood child care facilities, child care centers, convenience stores, health clinics, group homes, community care facilities, or daycare homes. Prior to the issue of any special permit use, council must have a public meeting to discuss those uses. So those are just uses that are currently allowed within the R1 zone. So moving to the PERD zone, the as of right permitted uses are single dwellings, duplex dwellings and semi-detached dwellings, townhouse dwellings having up to 6 units owned either individually or as condominiums, home occupations, home-based childcare facilities, neighborhood childcare facilities, active and passive recreation, parks and playgrounds, accessory buildings, private garages, public and/or private assisted care facilities. As special permitted uses within the PERD zone, which would require a public meeting, you can have group child care centers, community care facilities, public and/or private assisted care facilities, child care facilities, health clinics, multiple attached dwellings or apartments, and first floor commercial. So again, prior to the issuance of any special development permit, there must be a special public meeting held to discuss those items. That is the difference between the 2 zones that are being considered here this evening.
All right, with that, we have our presenters for this particular development with Landfest. We have John Harreld and Andrew McCormick off to our right. John's going to come up and introduce his consultant who will be presenting here tonight. So I'll ask John to do that.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Mayor and councillors that are here this evening. I also want to thank Jill and the Planning Department staff, Kevin and Blaine and their support staff. We were here earlier on Monday to see what the room would look like, and a lot of effort has gone forward to put this together, and I apologize for the delays. I mean, we started this in November, and here we are in July. Most of all, appreciate the residents that are out here tonight under the circumstances. As Jill said, hello to people out there watching on social media tonight. This is certainly different for all of us, and this is the first time that this has been done in the town of Stratford. I'm not sure. Maybe it's one of the first on Prince Edward Island. So.
I think Charlottetown has done one.
Have they?
And
Okay.
Summerside maybe.
So anyway, hopefully this isn't going to be the norm. But again, thank you for your patience in being here. So following the last group of meetings, there was a meeting. I think, as Kevin mentioned, there was a meeting with the full council and a representative from the community, where a number of the issues were brought forward from the previous discussions that we had had. And we went back with, listened to those meetings and went back with the consultant. And we have Rob Leblanc with us tonight from Fathom Studios. Those of you that were with us before will remember that Rob presented before. And also, Rob has done a lot of work in the community. He did the waterfront plan when the company was Acoustics. And so he's very familiar with the town, and we certainly appreciate having him involved. Their firm is very thorough and very professional. So what we'll be doing is Rob will be presenting to us verbally from Halifax. Kevin will be operating the slideshow for him. Rob will entertain any of the technical questions that come up. And/or Andrew and I will answer any questions that we can answer. Again, thank you for being here.
So with that, we'll move to Rob and his presentation, and we're going to let him present. And at the end of it, the rest of the meeting essentially will be open floor for questions.
Online, there we go. Hi, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to come out tonight, and I apologize that I can't be there, but I think in terms of safety, we thought it's best to minimize the number of people there, so we'll try this format. And thanks, Kevin and Jill and John, for the introduction, and I'm going to walk you through some of the changes, where we've been over the last number of years to get to this point, and show you the new plans. So Kevin, if you want to throw those up. So yes, I'm going to walk you through the process to date. I'll give you a bit of information on planning background that led to kind of the concept plan that we'll present tonight. I'll show you that plan and walk you through the traffic analysis. And I'll summarize where we go next. So if we could have the next slide. So this is really a process that began in 2013. The developer has worked with the community, hosting various meetings and workshops up until we had a draft planning submission in September of 2019. That submission was reviewed by PAC and was advanced to council in order for us to go forward with a public information meeting, which we held in November 27th in 2019. And based on that meeting, we had some further PAC questions and recommendations. We held another council session on January 22nd. And this evening's meeting was scheduled for March, but here we are, July 15th. And following this meeting, it will go back to planning board on August 13th, and we're thinking somewhere around August 12th based on feedback that we get. And then eventually to a second reading, which at a date we don't know yet. So if we could move to the next slide. I did want to refamiliarize you with the property. We've got roughly 14 acres of land that's located at the intersection of Stratford and Keppoch Road collectors. And for those of you who were at the November meeting, some of this presentation will sound a little bit familiar, but we anticipate there's probably some new listeners, so we're going to reintroduce some of this. We think this is a pretty unique site, in part because of its proximity to Sobeys, to the Stratford Town Centre, to the highway and commercial core, to a number of elementary schools that are around in the Montessori Academy, Fox Meadows, the AT trail that runs right through it. This, we believe, is a great parcel that could accommodate some density and would provide some benefits, being close and within walking distance of all of these facilities. So if we go to the next slide, just to kind of step back and give you a sense of how close we are to Sobeys and the highway, the AT collector that runs and actually bisects the site, and the arrows there are indicating some of the drainage lines. So we're fairly advantageous that this property drains into itself and not onto other properties, and drains to that AT collector into a drainage swale that runs down south of the Assumption Parish. As well, just you'll see some yellow lines on there representing where sunrise comes up and sunset. The prevailing winds come from the south-southwest in the summer, and from the northwest and western directions in the winter. So when we looked at this property, its current zoning as R1, we were looking at the highest and best use. And what we're proposing here is to move from a 3 units per acre, which is permitted under the current R1, to a 5 unit per acre development. Previously, we had requested a 7 unit per acre development. And again, looking at this urban transect, we are in an area that would not be considered rural. We're at the fringe of a suburban and a future urban generalized commercial zone. And what we're proposing is a range of housing types to provide a range of housing affordability. So in this case, we're looking at some slightly smaller single-family homes and townhomes. And we have removed the multi-unit apartment building that was part of the original plan, and some of the semis that were part of the original plan. But we're still proposing a walkable neighborhood with sidewalks on one side of all of the streets. We want to preserve that unbroken trail corridor, that AT connector that runs right through the center of the site. And we're proposing a much increased open space. 10% parkland dedication is fairly typical. We're proposing a 30% parkland dedication with a forest preserve and some stormwater management areas. So if we move to the next slide. So the land is currently, as Kevin noted, zoned as R1. And we're proposing to rezone it to PERD, which allows a little bit more flexibility in the housing types and unit types and the affordability of units. So I did want to reiterate back in our presentation in November that Prince Edward Island continues to be the fastest growing province in Canada. Based on the last census, and Stratford is the fastest growing community at 13.2% in PEI. It's trailing just 2 other municipalities in all of Canada. So that rapid pace of growth is, and trying to accommodate that growth in the best way possible, is part of the impetus for this plan that we see tonight. So if we move to the next slide, I did want to talk a bit about the difference of sprawl and of urban growth. And there's been a lot of writing, a lot of videos on this topic, and most planners will consider that urban sprawl is one of the single greatest threats to environment and economic sustainability. So when you're building R1 developments, in this case, we've got 72 feet of frontage, which is wide by any municipality standard. And the depth requirements, it means that you're building a lot more roads further from the core. You're making people travel in car more. You're eating up a lot more land, agricultural areas, conservation areas. You're creating additional traffic because these people are traveling on roads rather than walking. That additional traffic means additional air pollution, additional car dependencies. For a municipality, it has significant impacts. Roads are passed over to the municipality to maintain once they're built by a developer. And those roads and infrastructure have long-term costs to the municipality, to the point, where some municipalities are now looking at bankruptcy, having to deal with maintaining these sprawling roads that were built in the 50s and 60s. So it also is associated with a loss of green space and animal habitats, and it creates a class of people that require you to have a vehicle to get around. And because the lots are so large, it means they're expensive, and you have to build expensive homes on them. So it creates affordability issues. So I wanted to take a second, if we go to the next slide, and kind of walk you through what that means for Stratford in particular. But just before we do that, HRM went through a study back a number of years ago that if they continue to develop these sprawling subdivisions, that over an 18-year period, it would cost the municipality about $3 billion in municipal services just for the new roads that were created. And so back in 2010, HRM moved to a more central planning process where they're trying to densify the urban core of and trying to restrict subdivision development. And the little graphic on the right-hand side just conveys to you kind of the costs for the municipality. That a suburban sprawling development costs a municipality on average in Canada about $3,462 to maintain per unit per year, while an urban or a more compact form is about $1,416. So it has significant economic impacts on a municipality, as well as social and cultural impacts on communities. So if we move to the next slide, I wanted to kind of take you through a quick example for Stratford. Over the last 3 years, Stratford's built out about 220 units per year. And if those units were built using the traditional R1, which is a 72-foot frontage, those 220 units would result in 2.6 kilometers of new road being built. This is every year. That translates into an extra 2 million kilometers of driving. And again, that's just for these new 220 homes having to travel at 2.6 kilometers. That would create, there'd be about 180,000 liters of gas consumed to do that, and there'd be 40,000 hours of driving time for that 2.6 kilometers. That land area would consume 58 acres of land. And so this is every year where we would see 58 acres taken out of agricultural land, out of natural areas. And when we compare that to a compact development, 220 units could be built on 2 small apartment buildings on frontage that already exists. So we wouldn't necessarily have to build any new roads to do that. It wouldn't create any new driving within kind of that same center area. No gas, no driving time, and the land area would consume 2 to 3 acres. So just to give you a snapshot of the difference of a sprawling development versus a compact development, and you can see pretty quickly the environmental ramifications and social and economic implications of continuing traditional sprawling suburban development. So if we go to the next slide, what we're proposing, the original plan was for 101 units. That's been reduced down to 76 units when we took out the apartment building. And so when we look at just this parcel of land, this 14-acre parcel, if we were to build those 76 units using traditional R1, it would be about a kilometer of new road that would have to be built. That would translate into 300,000 kilometers of driving for those new 76 units over that 1 kilometer in a year period. That would be 27,000 liters of gas that would be consumed, and about 6,000 hours of driving, and it would consume 33 acres of land. And when we compare that to what we're proposing here today, which is a slightly more compact, rather than 3 units per acre, we're proposing a 5 unit per acre, so still very low density. This development will build about 300 meters of road, or 0.3 kilometers of road. Within that development, that's in a 1 year period, about 80,000 kilometers of driving within that development. About 7,200 liters of gasoline, 1,600 hours of driving time, and in a land area that's about 8.4 acres. So you have to remember that on this 14-acre parcel, 30% is proposed as parkland, so about 4.2 acres are park. So when you compare kind of the traditional R1 form to what we're proposing as a very modest change from the traditional R1, the benefits are fairly significant for the community. So if we move to the next slide, again, just reiterating, we're looking at creating a walkable community somewhere around we're moving from 3 units per acre to 5 units per acre. And if we move to the next slide, the old plan that was presented in November of 2019, you'll notice at that time we had proposed to maintain the AT network through the site, that we had these stormwater ponds that were going to be park-like features, but that would also control runoff from the entire development. We're proposing 3 cul-de-sacs as part of this development, and part of that plan was to split some of the traffic onto Redden Heights and onto Stratford Road, so that not all the traffic was moving through, and that it eliminated any any shortcutting through the neighborhood to get to other parts of the community. So the new proposed plan, which you see here tonight, what you'll see is we've moved from the R1s were proposed as 40 foot of frontage, and we've moved that in discussions with the Planning Advisory Committee back to 48 feet. So that eliminated one of the R1 units that back onto Millennium Drive, which gave, we moved from a 3 foot and a 12-foot side yard, which we had previously, where the house is not in the middle of the lot. We've now moved that to a 6-foot side yard and a 12-foot side yard. So in total, we have 18 feet of between each home. And when we look at the current zoning requirement of 8 feet, that would create 16 feet between each zone. So this actually separates the houses even more than the current R1 zoning on a slightly narrower lot, from 72 feet down to 48 feet of frontage. You'll also notice on this plan we've removed the multi-unit apartment building, and that's been replaced with townhomes. We've removed the 2 semi-units, and those have been replaced with a single townhome cluster. And we had some properties, for the most part, all of the R1s that back on R1s now currently have R1s that back on the existing R1s. We had a condition in the southern corner where one of the townhomes backed onto the R1, and we've changed that plan and we've put an R1 in so that we can maintain all R1s backing onto R1s. So this plan proposes 76 units. We've got 18 R1s and 58 townhouse units. We're preserving the stormwater management in the center. We're keeping that AT corridor so that it doesn't have to connect, doesn't have to cross a road. There's sidewalks on one side of all the new streets. We've maintained the one large wooded area as parkland, and we've introduced one new playground park that's in the center of the development. So we're at currently 5.1 units per acre, down from the previous 7 units per acre. So the next slide. We just had some views again. This would be kind of the sidewalk on one side, the street. You'll notice that we've pulled the townhomes and the R1 buildings a little closer to the street. If we go to the next slide, we're proposing to require at least 4 trees on every lot that would be part of the development. And we're also proposing that there's one caliper-sized street tree every 50 feet of road frontage on both sides of every street. So the developer will be adding urban forest as part of this plan. And on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll notice these new units, slightly narrower than the existing R1s. But what we've also done is pulled them closer to the street. There would be design standards to maintain the high standard of architectural design for these. And so what you see in this plan is any garages would have to be set back from the front of the unit so that we don't see all garages out front, and that homes would have verandas so that and you're close to the street and able to talk to neighbors that are walking on these new sidewalks. So if we move to the next slide. Again, just a shot. This was actually a shot from the previous where they were actually a little closer. These are 15 feet separation. We've now since moved to 18 feet of separation, so they'll be actually a little wider than this. And so we have the 3-foot side yard on one side, so on the right-hand side in this case, and on the left-hand side, which we've changed to 6 feet now, and the 12 feet on the other side, which is enough room to provide a driveway so that cars can actually go into the side. That way we don't have the frontage all blocked up with cars, and we can push the driveway, the garages back. So this is a view over Redden Heights, kind of floating up over the end of Redden Heights, looking back towards the development. This new playground and park that would be a central part of the new development. Townhouses on the right and single family homes on the left. Next slide. And kind of a watery day looking at the stormwater management areas, which would be designed preliminarily as stormwater ponds as the site is being developed. These would hold any sediment and erosion control to keep any silt from moving from the site and keep it on site. And then once the site is built out, they'd be transitioned into to wet ponds. Some of them may be dry ponds. It depends on the drainage calculations and how much water can be provided as part of these. But this is a view from one of the cul-de-sacs looking through that AT corridor. You see the bike. And as part of the original plan, we thought it was more important to keep the connectivity of the AT connection without having to cross a road, rather than running the road through the middle of this and having people having to cross that road. So that's part of the design scheme. Next slide. And I wanted to show you, this is Milton, Ontario. This is the fastest growing community in Canada. They have a standard of 32-foot frontage, and this is what 32-foot looks like in Milton. And they have a similar design standard where the R1s are pulled up so that there's a very small front yard. Most of the homes have verandas so that you can talk to your neighbor as they're walking on the sidewalk. And what you'll also notice in this picture is that the driveways or the garages have all been set back from the front of the building so that you're not just looking at the side of garages as you're driving up. Those are often referred to as snout homes, and they look terrible. And we're looking at a very much higher standard for R1s. And then if we move to the next slide, the townhomes, would be no higher than 3 stories. If there are 3 stories in the townhomes, they would be built into the roof of the structure so that they look like 2-story townhomes with a roof on top. So they're not stacked townhomes. They're just your traditional townhomes with a unique character, with clusters of between 5 and 6 units per townhome cluster. And also you'll see, if we could just go back to that slide just for a second, what we've done on almost all of ours is we've put the parking in behind as well too, so that you don't have just a sea of driveways and cars out front. And that way all the cars go back in behind. You can have your garage in behind and your decks and verandas on top of the garage, which is also alluded to in Stratford's land use bylaw. Next slide. I just wanted to end with the transportation study. If we go to the next slide, this transportation study was done for the previous development proposal, which was 101 units. We're now down to 76 units. We haven't updated that traffic study for the current, but we're roughly a quarter of the units that we had previously. So a quarter of the results that I'm going to present here tonight are applicable under the new proposed scenario. So back when we started this project back in September, we set up, you'll notice the top right-hand corner, counting devices around the neighborhoods. It's called a MyoVision, and it counts people, counts bikes, buses, cars, trucks, and allows us to create a detailed traffic profile for the community. And if you move to the next slide, we take that data and then that goes into a traffic modeling application where we simulate the traffic, and we use the existing traffic counts, and then we put in the new unit counts that will generate their own traffic, and we create a very detailed traffic simulation to look at the detailed impacts on all of the intersections, all of the surrounding roads, and on the regional road networks. And of course, these traffic study was done for 101 units. So if we move to the next slide, what the traffic plan talks about is, very important, the connectivity of the Stratford Trail and the maintenance of that disconnected nature of the AT trail that runs through. That the community already has excellent AT potential and transit connectivity, that the development offers significant internal green space and amenities. Its proximity to schools mean that we don't have to get in cars. We can walk to Sobeys, we can walk to local schools on this connected AT network. And that the 76 units now generate relatively low volumes of new car traffic, and that there is certainly available capacity on the adjacent streets to accommodate this new development. So if we move to the next slide, it just kind of summarizes some of these traffic results. just pointing out at a very high level, when you look at Stratford Road, Redden Heights, all of the surrounding road connections. On Redden Heights, this was back when we had 101 units, that there would be one peak direction vehicle about every 75 seconds. So that's in peak times, morning and evening peaks. You'd have a vehicle every 75 seconds. And that in off-peak times, it's really every 2 to 3 minutes on Redden Heights. And of course, those numbers would be decreased by roughly 25% as a result of the reduction in the new units. And also, when we look at any delays coming out of Redden Heights at Stratford, it would increase by less than 3 seconds. So you're sitting at that stop sign for no more than 3 seconds as part of this new development. Most of the traffic is local as a result of not connecting that road all the way through. It means that local traffic only, and we don't have shortcutting through this neighborhood onto surrounding streets. So Redden Heights is proposed with grass shoulders. It's proposed with sidewalks to help promote slower speeds. We've added street trees again to confine and reduce road speeds within the development. And we've identified these important connections from within the development to the existing AT networks. And next slide. And so that's it. I think that kind of gives you a high-level overview. We've worked hard with PAC and with council to make these changes, and we believe that this is a really good plan when you look at the option of 76 units and how it could be built out under the current R1 scenario. I'll hand it back over to Kevin for questions.
Yeah, so that concludes the presentation. We'll open the floor for questions. Like I said, we have all council, we have the mayor, and we have all members of our planning committee listening in tonight, and we're here to listen. Oh. We're going to open the floor for questions. Maybe I'm not close enough to it. Like I said, all council's here, the mayor's here, and our planning committee residents are sitting at home watching tonight, so we're all here to listen to your questions and concerns. I, again, ask you to come to the mic and address me with your question, and I'll pass that on to the individual that can answer that. Identify yourself and your address. And again, Kevin will be removing that slip in between speakers. For those of you online, there will be a delay. If you have questions, send them in, and they're going to be emailed to me. They'll pop up here, but there will be a little bit of delay, so just a little patience there. So with that, I'll open the floor, I guess.
Good evening. My name is David Ing. 158 Stratford Road. Just opposite, there's 3 or 4 houses facing the new development. Question to Kevin, first of all. In your description of the PURD, you didn't say number of units. And I can appreciate what John Harald is doing, trying to maximize his profit by putting X number of units. Within that description, do you have a specific number?
Within the
PURD.
Yeah, I'm just making sure my microphone's on here. Within the PURD zone, the maximum density is 20 units per acre.
20 units, sorry?
20 units per acre.
Per acre, okay, okay.
I'm sorry, I said that wrong. I'm just thinking back. 10 units per acre. 10 units per acre is the maximum.
10,
yes.
Okay.
I believe this proposal is just over 5.1, I think. Yeah.
Right, right, okay. The plot opening on the Stratford Road is the same size as the adjoining 2 house lots. You know where I live, Kevin?
Yep, I can point here too, David, if that helps.
158 Stratford Road.
You live right there?
Yes, I live right there,
Yep.
okay? Where John or the development is proposed for 20 units, I understand, excuse me, townhouses in that area, and yet it's the same size as the adjoining 2 house lots. We feel, our neighbors feel, it's too small for 20 townhouses. It will certainly desecrate the neighborhood. Wind tunnel, I know, but, and I should have preempted it, I guess, to say or begin with, we're not against development. I've talked to John before, and I see your point exactly, but we, single-family units in this area, for all of them, would work exceptionally well, and we really, really support that. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thanks, David.
Hello, my name is Janet Compton, and I live at 25 Millennium Drive. I want to say thanks to Stratford for holding this meeting. It's a very important topic in our neighborhood. Some residents that I spoke to were upset they couldn't attend because of health concerns and because of the current pandemic situation we're in. And I hope you don't take it, that the mayor and the town council and the town of Stratford doesn't take it, is that people aren't interested in this development anymore. Because I did meet with quite a few people and they do have some concerns. On this proposed PERD application, in my opinion, I think 59 townhouses is super aggressive. I think it will create rentals in our neighborhood, which would be including Airbnbs. These are people that are not interested in investing in our neighborhood, and they're not caring community people as we are. I see a potential parking issue in this proposed development. Residents probably will be able to park in their driveway, but I'm thinking more visitors to their homes, to their properties. Seems like the streets perhaps will be too narrow, nowhere to park. Safety and accessibility for emergency vehicles, plus easy access for these first responders in and out of these developments. The one-way in and one-way out on Redden Heights is unacceptable, in my opinion, especially for emergency situations. The surrounding streets of this neighborhood are meant for R1 zone traffic, single residential units, and are not built for PERD development or traffic. This will become a major safety issue for our town. And I'm not even sure if they can handle the construction traffic for this type of development either. For current R1 zoning, to keep it currently R1, it maintains the integrity of our surrounding neighborhoods. We bought our properties knowing that this land would be developed someday, and we expected R1. And I think to change the zoning of this to a PERD is a really bad move for Stratford to make. We bought the properties knowing that that would be R1 and it would maintain our property values. We have invested in our properties. We want to feel safe on our neighborhood streets as we go about our daily activities. We want them safe for ourselves, for our families, and for our pets. We care about this community that we live in, and we want this land developed as something we can be proud of, not something where we're searching for real estate agents. Current residents are not against developing this land as R1. To our mayor and town council, this rezoning process has been going on for at least 8 years that I've been a part of. I've seen many designs for this property, and I think we've actually agreed in the past for a design for this property, but for some reason that never went forward. My main point is that when this property was bought, it was bought as an R1. Now it's 2020, and supposedly Stratford is saturated with R1 houses that are for sale, and they don't need any more. Well, you know what? That's not our problem. The cost of building materials and supplies are more costly now. Again, that's not our fault. And we shouldn't have to pay the price through our property values decreasing or giving up the safety of our streets. Mayor and council, I appreciate you giving us the time to voice our concerns. If this rezoning application was in your neighborhood, you would be where I am standing today, I can guarantee it. This land, once developed, is something Stratford will never get back, and I ask you to treat it with the respect that it deserves. Say no to the PURD rezoning.
Thank you, Janet. And if there are any concerns there that anyone wants to speak to, Rob or John, or there are a few in there regarding Airbnbs, parking, safety of first responders getting in and out, construction traffic, maintaining integrity of the neighborhood. If you wanted to respond to any of those concerns. I don't know if Rob's still on or.
Yeah, I'm
There.
still here. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, parking, we've designed the units to have at least 2 cars per unit. And I wanted to address, you know, quite often in generalized future land use plans for community, the land is either zoned as kind of an agricultural reserve, or it's zoned long-term as R1. But as communities development, and particularly at the pace that Stratford is developing, it's not uncommon to look at rezoning for a slightly higher density. And again, the PURD allows about 10 units per acre. We're half of that number, and we're only slightly above what you could do with a traditional R1. You know, we could certainly fill up this entire parcel of land with R1. We think the idea of having a little bit more density to allow for much more park space, the 30% parkland, is a good trade-off. And as I've noted, the traffic study suggests that there'll be no substantial impact to any of the adjoining roads.
Thanks, Rob. And actually, coming off that, we did have a question come in here from Bernadette Milner, 8 Quebec Road. What date was the traffic study done? And basically her point is basically leading to, was it done after March 16th? Because traffic would be substantially low. And it wasn't done after March 16th. It was done back in October, November sometime of 2019.
It was done prior to September. The initial submission went in September, so it would have been the month of August and early September that went in. And the traffic data is also supplemented by the Department of Transportation's traffic data. So it's not just our data on one certain day. It uses a much wider window of traffic.
Thanks. Go ahead, John.
Thanks, Jill. I just wanted to address a couple of Janet's concerns, and thank you for your concerns. Airbnb is a phenomena that's become global. It's kind of turned a little bit on its heels now because a lot of people, even in Charlottetown, are scrambling to try to get their rentals back to monthly rentals as opposed to nightly rentals. Stratford hasn't fully addressed that, but they've looked at it, and I guess we have to control that as a society, because you can Airbnb on Millennial just as easy as you could on any one of these streets. As for property values, I'm not sure what the average price of the houses when people would have bought them or built them in this area, but this past week in a new development in Stratford, a on-slab semi-detached 2-bedroom on a small lot. Both sides sold within a week for $345,000. So prices have gone up significantly, and there is, and I believe on the committee, I don't know if he's still on the committee, Joel Ives from Century 21 was at the last public meeting, and he attested to the fact that the property value is not an issue or a concern. As per agreed upon a design, we had many designs that we went through, and because we have had virtually 7 years that we've been working on this project, the needs everywhere, and especially in Stratford, have changed for the type of housing that we require, and it's, you know, does Stratford want to be a diversified and inclusive community where we can house our seniors, we can have starter homes, we can have young families? We don't have a lot of that product right now, and some of that product would be in this development. And I agree with you, Janet, it's nobody's fault that the price of land has gone up, the price of building materials has gone up, the price of labor has gone up, but we do have a responsibility to provide shelter for people, and I hope that the community of Stratford is one of those communities that wants to change with the times and provide the product that people can afford, and that we can adapt to those changes. The lumber's gone up 30% in the last 6 weeks. That's not a permanent thing, but that's just an example of how things sway back and forth. So that was just a few of those items there. Thanks.
Thank you. Floor is open.
Ann McDonald, 2 Redden Heights. My concern, I live right on the corner of Redden Heights and Stratford Road. Traffic studies or not, adding that much traffic on Redden Heights is going to be an issue for people getting in and out of their driveways. My concern is they're going to get to the top of the hill, and we notice a difference since Millennium went in. They turn out and they hit the gas heading for down the street. And yes, the police can watch and all of that, but that is a concern. Our neighborhood has gone through the young age. We're all getting to retirement age, and we want to be safe backing out onto Redden Heights to go down the Stratford Road. The other question I have is, how deep is the property? What's the depth? Can anybody answer that? It's 48-foot frontage. What is the back?
Rob,
Yeah.
would you have that depth that you could tell us what the depth of those single-family
I
lots are?
believe it's 130, but I'm just going by memory.
Okay.
130 feet, I believe, is the lot depth.
if you look at the last home on Redden Heights, which is, I'll point to it on the screen here, right here, they are similar depths to the existing homes along Redden Heights. It's just they're narrower along the frontage, with the exception of the ones up in the cul-de-sac up here.
Another issue I was told was when Millennium was being built, our septic is not deep enough, and one of my neighbor's septic was crushed with a big truck going up. And have they brought that into thought during the construction?
I'll just so if John might be, if you want to run through your questions, we can make notes and then we can get him up to answer your questions.
And the big one would be, is there going to be a second exit? One exit off is just unacceptable.
I don't know, Kevin, if anyone can speak to the history of that sewer line, or how, maybe what we can do, Ann, is we can maybe get back to you on that particular piece and see if that would be an issue.
Yeah, we'd have to ask our infrastructure department on it, and I don't recall that, but it would be in a different department from where I work, so we'll certainly ask that
We'll
question.
make a
and
note
get
of
back to
that.
you. Yep.
My name is Danny Wood. I live at 29 Millennium. And I find myself here again, and I don't know why. Because I haven't seen a whole lot of change from the first proposal that I was involved in back in 2019. Yes, the apartment building is gone, but it's replaced with townhouses in the lower meadow. Virtually nothing has changed for the houses that back onto Millennium Drive, even though in the submission it states that it's the properties backing onto Millennium have been further spread out to reduce density, where there's exactly the same number of dwellings backing onto Millennium Drive in the current proposal as there was back in 2019. None of my concerns that I iterated back in November of 2019 have been dealt with regards to the elevation of the field, which is higher than my property and several of my neighbors. So the drainage that currently exists, I'm suspecting it's going to end up in my backyard, and my house is built on a slab. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the traffic issues. I understand the study was done. I'm sorry, I don't believe it. The amount of traffic coming up Millennium, which is coming off of Redden Heights, going on to Marion, and now with the new street going through from Marion up to the schools, you know what's going to happen as soon as the schools open. I'm a little concerned. Given the articles that have been published nationally over the last few months on the negative impact in higher density housing areas of the transmission of a pandemic, I'm a little bit appalled that council would even consider going to higher density housing given what we're going through right now. I understand sprawl, and I understand that there's a cost to sprawl. But perhaps the way we live right now in PEI is what is attracting people here. Please, I implore council and the mayor, don't turn Stratford and Prince Edward Island into an urban jungle. We don't want it. Please respect the residents that elected you to serve, please.
Thank you, Danny. I guess just quickly on the drainage issue, Kevin, that'd be something that would come up when you get into the engineering, right? That would be addressed.
Any development will require a professionally designed stormwater management plan that has to be approved by both the town and the transportation infrastructure department with the province. So, you know, there may be some concern with the existing contours, although I believe the majority of this land does drain towards the swale or the active transportation corridor, but that would all have to be taken into consideration during the design. So, you know, if there was any issues, they would be mitigated during the design.
Hi, my name is Ann Killen, and I'm live in 7 Redden Heights. My husband and I have lived there for 35 years.
Can you step a little closer?
sorry.
I don't think they can hear you.
Good. My
There you
name
go.
is Ann Killen. I live on 7 Redden Heights, and my husband and I have lived on Redden Heights for 35 years. I have to reiterate what Janet and other people have said, like from the start of this process 7 years ago to where it is now is so completely different. And it is, it's scary is what it is for me. When my calculations, if there's 2 vehicles for 57 homes coming on to Redden Heights, they're going 2 times a day. That would mean 228 additional vehicles on our street every day. I live halfway down on number 7, and I say, councillors, Mr. Mayor, developers, planning committee, would you be one on a street where you have 228 additional vehicles every day? I don't want to be there. And it's speed. On this traffic study, did they talk about anything about speed? Buses, delivery trucks, even Canada Post, you have to get off the street when they're driving up the street. And that's with only that few vehicles. So you're going to add 57 more reasons for people to be on that street, on our street. I want to, I'm nervous and I'm upset. And I was told when there's people speeding on my street to call the RCMP. If I call the RCMP every time there was a speeder on our street, I would be labeled a nuisance and they would never answer the phone. And I can guarantee you that. I have some desires. I desire safety for the young children. There are some living on our street. I want to see them safe. I don't want to see them out on the street and being hit. I desire to live peacefully, where I have for the last 35 years, to come and go from my home without being fear of run over or run into as I try to exit and especially enter my driveway, because they come up behind me and they'll run over you. And I want to be able to safely walk my grandchildren to the park, which I can't do now, and I will definitely not be able to when you put 57 more cars on my street that is too narrow and is not set up for that amount of traffic. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Again, if there's anyone, John or Rob, if you want to speak to any of these issues, just let me know.
Yeah, I mean, do you mind if I just chat with that just for a second?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to take those 220 vehicles over, say, a 14-hour day period, that's roughly 19 or 20 cars per hour. So it's certainly not very dense. And when you look at the impact of, as I mentioned, those 220 homes that we have to accommodate in Stratford, this road network is 0.3 of a kilometer versus whatever it was, 2.5 kilometers if you built that out, which adds significantly more traffic in the town of Stratford, significantly more vehicle trips. You know, we have to look at the broader context of traffic in all of Stratford, not just in one small local area. And we're moving from 3 units per acre to 5 units per acre. You know, it's not quite double the amount of traffic that you would have, but we would have to, even under an R1 scenario, have to deal with traffic increases.
Thanks, Rob. The mic is open. I just did have a quick question come in from Bernadette Milner, 8 Keppoch Road. Once again, it's a quick one, I would say, for John. Will this development be done all at once or in a phased approach?
Well, two things. Back to traffic again, because traffic is obviously a concern for everybody in our community. And it appears, and I think this came out in the last meeting, is that there was a lot of concern about traffic in this area even without the development. And that's where I had brought up the point at the last meeting that we have to work with the town, with the Department of Transportation, with quieting techniques, because it sounds like they're needed there now already. And, in order to accommodate more vehicles, and like Rob said, not many more than we would if we were just R1, we have to address this situation. I was fortunate enough to be able to travel in May to visit a new grandchild, and I was in Calgary in an established subdivision that had, all new artery roads built around it and so on. And I went around and looked at some of the quieting practices that they've used. A lot of them are movable concrete mediums and so on and so forth. I agree. I think I forgot who said it. At the last meeting, not necessarily a stop sign doesn't mean anything. People can roll through it. So we have to look at the problems, at the issues, and we have to address those, as Rob said, as a broader vision for the whole area, not just magnifying glass on this point. To the approach of the phased development, I call it A, B, and C. A being you develop the plan would be to develop off of Stratford Road first, which would be we would hope it would be started later this fall or next spring. B would be the houses in the central, the single-family homes and the central townhouses, and the last would be what I call C, would be the parcel and the townhouses that border onto the onto Assumption Parish. Answer that question.
Thank you. All right, and I think there was a lady behind that tried to get up. A couple with the the one with the orange hood. I think she's been trying to get up a few times, and so I'll let her go.
Just 1 second, I'll get this away.
And I'll just take a minute. We are going to try to get to these two questions as well. We do have another public meeting for another development that is supposed to start at 7:15, but we can be a little bit flexible for sure, because I know this is important. If anyone is coming in, that's being tended to by Jamie?
Yep,
or,
that's
okay.
fine.
All right.
Just to let people online know that we may run a little late, that's all. If you're tuning in, we're still on agenda item number 1.
Thanks. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Brenda Martin. I live in Redden Heights. I've been there for 40 years, and I hope to end my life over here, but with this, I don't think I will be. It just appalls me to think that our little quiet street is going to be a roadway for that subdivision, which is ridiculous in my point. Like, I can't believe that they're going to have all that traffic on our little street. Like, it's not safe. And I'm worried about runoff. We're on a hill coming down Redden Heights. We get enough now for Millennium in the wintertime. So, there's another big no-no for me. And speed is another issue. The more traffic, I'm worried about emergencies. Too much traffic. Councillors, Mr. Mayor, if this was in your backyard, I hope you would do the right thing and say no to Redden Heights as being the roadway for that subdivision. Right now, when I go somewhere, if I'm going to town or I go to Sobeys, I drive out of my driveway down Redden Heights. I turn left to go to wherever and right to go wherever. I don't go through a subdivision that was my street for 40 years. That is ridiculous. So if it was in your backyard, I hope you will do the right thing And why can't you just exit it out on the Stratford Road? A road, not a street. Like, that's my question. Why is it exiting? All those cars and people coming onto one little street. And don't tell me they're going to go up Millennium, and don't tell me they're going to go down John Hamilton, because I know where the streets come. I know where the traffic goes. Half the people on Marion, they go up our street because there's speed bumps on Marion. You know? So just take all that into consideration, and I hope this will do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, once he goes through the process, you're up. And I'm not going to get anyone to, I just want to get all your concerns out. So I'm not going to take time to answer everything at this point. We just want to get the concerns on the floor.
Sure, thanks.
No
Hi.
worries.
My name's Pam Wynn, and I live at 37 Millennium Drive. And I couldn't agree more with everything that Danny and Janet and everyone has said. The traffic concerns about managing construction traffic, runoff, the list goes on and on. I'm not, and again, you might have to get back to me on this, but there was mention in one of the graphics about prevailing winds, and one of the things I love most about our backyard is that beautiful summer breeze. So I'm just thinking about that quality of life and that enjoyment, and is that going to disappear when there's 76 units that are now, I counted 15, specifically 15 single-family dwellings that are now going to be having 76 units in their backyard. So that's something to consider. And also, I guess I'm a little bit concerned if residents here clearly don't support this rezoning. I'm asking, and I hope that you do support the residents, but I'm wondering what's involved in the process if you do vote against the residents' wishes, and what's involved in that decision-making process. Again, I understand, you know, development needs to happen, but is there no other land in Stratford that is not completely surrounded by single-family dwellings where a compact development community could be started? So.
Thank you, Pam. There are, when council considers this, there are a list of, I think, 13 items that council has to consider. This isn't a decision that council makes without parameters and criteria, because it can be legally challenged, honestly. So there are 13, I believe, items, and concerns of residents are one of those. And to be honest, I think the 13th is any other concerns. It's one of those all-inclusive statements, so really 12 items, and I can certainly email that to anyone who wants to know exactly what those criteria are for decision-making as far as council's concerned. And you're up.
My name is Linda Mosier, and I live at 9 Millennium Drive. This new planned subdivision will not be directly behind us, but we will still be affected by it. When I'm probably a newbie on Millennium Drive, or a relatively new newbie, when we moved in 5 years ago, we had no idea at all that there was going to be a subdivision behind there. Probably our realtor should have told us. Maybe we should have asked, but I thought, isn't that beautiful? We see foxes and birds, and we've even seen a few snakes. I don't like them, but anyway, we have seen them. But my husband and I are retirement age, and it was lovely and quiet, and I am not in favor of any subdivision back there. However, I have to kind of go with the flow, but the less denser it is, the better it is. I don't know how long it will take, how many stages. I would say we're probably thinking 2 years, Just think about 2 years of hearing backhoes and beep, 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 beep that starts at 6 o'clock in the morning and goes on all day long. Yeah, I like the wind, but I don't like the wind blowing friggin' old red dirt all over my windows and my sheets that are hanging on the line. And also, the other thing I was concerned about was we were told that the buses that would come and go in that planned subdivision, and that the children would be able to walk because they're in close proximity to the school and whatnot. Well, I don't know about you, but I sure don't see many kids walking to school. There may be a few, but they are really in the minority. It's the school buses that take the kids 1 block to school. So those school buses are going to be coming and going on Redden Heights and around and up Millennium and down Marion. And that's my concern. Sorry. That's the way I feel. But I do agree with everything else that was said, and I do know I have to go with the flow. If there's going to be a subdivision, so be it. But let's stick with the R1.
Thank you, Linda. So with that, okay, we'll take one more. No, go ahead. And I hate to rush it. I usually, I guess I just don't want to keep those people waiting downstairs too long either. Go ahead.
I won't be long. My name is Leslie Collins. I live in that area. I'm affected by the traffic considerably. I'm not sure when you did your, I guess you said you did it in August, September. It's substantially different when school's on, the traffic that rolls through our area. When the bridge gets backed up, which it has frequently, they rip through up Redden, across Millennium, down Marion. It's lined up on our streets to get over to the school or to the bridge. With that new little side road that's connecting Sobeys and the school system into this, I think you're being incredibly naive if you don't think this is not going to have an effect on Marion and Millennium and Redden again. Redden, Marion, and Millennium, we don't have paved shoulders, we don't have sidewalks, we're a sidestep from the school, there's playgrounds in the area. I don't understand why there's no either a paved shoulder or sidewalks for that area. There had been frequent walkers in the area. There must be 1 million dogs in our community. But with COVID, there's even all that many more people walking, and it's simply not safe now, let alone then. The 2 Canada posts on Millennium are on turns. It's Snake Street, so now we've got added traffic. Again, I think 2 cars, 2 household would be incredibly naive again. House across the street from me has 6 cars there at all times. So, and that's with a double garage. So I don't, if you think it's going to be 2 vehicles, I'd be very, very surprised. I'm not quite on top of this sprawl stuff. I know you're talking about savings of energy because people won't be driving, but I think if you're going to jam a whole bunch of people in, you're also going to have a whole lot more heating costs per area and environment issues on that. I guess, oh, yes, I think one of the comments I read in the letter was that it was going to be affordable housing. I haven't heard anything on the prices of this housing and where it's going to be affordable and who it's not going to be affordable to. And for diversity, in that 3-street neighborhood, we have people on financial assistance, we have professionals, we have retired people, we have families, we have all kinds of diversity there, and we certainly have ethnicity diversity as well. So I have no problem with R1s, but if you think we need to diversify more, I'm not sure how. Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. All right, I'll do one more just because if we do have someone that really wants to get up, what's that? Yeah. We're doing the best we can. I don't see any more coming in online from social media, so it's up to anyone here if they want to say anything. The floor is open.
Maybe repeat that into the mic.
Okay, so the question from the floor that's being asked is basically what would be the cost of some of these units that they're proposing to build? And I'll get John to come up and speak to that.
If you had asked me last week and you're asking me today, it's two different answers. The costs are changing on a daily basis, and we had a target point when we started this 7 years ago, and like I stated earlier, there was half sides of semi-detached are selling for $345 right now. I'm hoping that we can have units that are going to be much less than that. The infrastructure in this with the stormwater ponds and so on, we don't price that infrastructure until you have a set plan. And so it's very hard to dictate a price at this point in time. But for a townhouse, for example, we're probably going to be, I would say, $275 to $325 with today's current market. And with those single-family homes, we're probably going to be $375 to $425. Okay.
Can I just add one more?
Oh, Rob's trying to come in.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just in comparison, when you look at a 72, what it costs to develop a 72-foot road frontage, that extra asphalt, again, 0.3 kilometers versus 1 kilometer, and you're on a bigger lot, a lot more costs. Doing a compact development is substantially less to build, so just relatively speaking.
All right, thank you. I'm going to, and again, if you have any further questions or further concerns, please email the planning department, the planning staff. They're going to be open to receive those for the next 7 days till July 22nd. Next steps, so that's going to happen. So we're going to receive all those submissions, and there's going to be a planning board meeting that's going to be dedicated to this, August 3rd, 2020. And they're going to take into consideration everything from the first public meeting through, and any comments received. There's no curtain put down after the first public meeting. Every comment that's been submitted since the start of this application will be reviewed and up for discussion. Coming out of that planning board meeting, if there's a recommendation that goes to council at that planning board meeting, then the next town council meeting for a decision would be August 12th, 2020. That's tentative. That's based on whether there is a recommendation that goes to planning board. And that's the next steps. So I would like to thank you all for coming and taking time out of your day to come here, especially under these conditions, to voice your concern and bring forward your feedback. And with that, I think, Kevin, we'll ask, as I said at the head of the meeting, that to exit through this door so we can bring in the next meeting the other way. So again, thank you.
If we could just file out maybe one row at a time, folks, just to ensure that we keep our social distance, that would be great. Thank you very much. I'm just going to let Jamie know that we're...
Apologies on the delay, folks. We're just making sure everyone that was registered is here. And I suppose even if they aren't, we'll probably move forward because you already waited 15 minutes longer. All right, I'm going to call this meeting to order. I'm just going to go through, again, for those of you online that are joining in, you might have heard this at the start, but I'm going to go through it again for the benefit of the people in the room. We'd like to welcome you all to this public meeting and also to our emergency services building. We moved to this location in order to accommodate our COVID operational plan for this event. I'm Jill Burridge. I'm a counselor and a chair of the Planning and Development and Heritage Committee. This is a first for our town. We're broadcasting this public meeting live via the town's Facebook page, and the recorded meeting will also be available on the town's YouTube channel after the meeting is finished. In the room, we have residents, presenters, town council, and our mayor. Up here with me is Kevin Reynolds, our director of planning. We also have the town planner, Blaine Yatabi. And we have asked the 5 resident planning committee members to watch and listen from their homes tonight, just to make sure there was enough seats for all the residents that want to come. Washrooms, if needed, are off to the right. There's a hand washing station out there, and we ask that one person at a time go in there. I'll get you to turn cell phones to silent. And when you exit the building at the end of this meeting, we're going to ask you to go out this door. I guess we're minimizing exposure because there is another meeting after this, and we just want to, I guess, keep groups not intermingling. As far as the format tonight, we are going to have a presentation from our developers. For in-house questions, the microphone is here. We ask that you come up, speak clearly, so our virtual attendees can hear. And as always, we ask you to state your name and your address. And one thing that is different is we have slips over the microphones just for sanitary reasons in this new world we're living in. So once someone speaks, that slip's going to be taken off and a new one put on. Oh, and remove your mask when you speak, just for the benefit of people who might need to read lips. We're going to try to accommodate that. So when you go to the mic, take your mask off. Virtual questions coming in. We're going to be monitoring the page. Any questions are going to be sent to me and pop up on my email. There is a delay, so we ask for your patience there. There's about a 30-second delay. Please indicate where you live. And we're only going to bring questions forward from social media that relate to the items being discussed tonight and that have not already been asked or addressed. And also to everyone out there, if you want to comment, for the social media folks, if you're posting a comment on the social media, that's not going to qualify as a written submission to this development. We'd ask that you would formally write a submission. The comments that are just put on the website are not going to be captured as part of the written submission process. And also, the town will be accepting written responses directly to the planning department by email or in writing until next Wednesday, July 22nd. So you'll have lots of time to, if you don't get to ask tonight or don't feel comfortable asking tonight, you have 7 days to submit that to the planning department. With that, Kevin is going to actually go through the application and what that is and a few little items on that. And then we're going to have a presentation by the applicant, and then we're going to open the floor for questions. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Kevin.
Thanks, Councillor. So this application this evening that's being considered is a rezoning application from Greenway Realty to rezone parcel number 399725, approximately 6.46 acres in total, from the low-density residential zone R1 to the planned unit residential development zone PERD. just to go back through some of the steps of what brought us here. So this application was originally received and vetted through the planning board and council to determine that it would be called to go to a public meeting. That public meeting was originally scheduled for March 12th. Unfortunately, due to COVID, that meeting was canceled, and this is the rescheduled date for that meeting. A total of 103 notification letters were sent out, both on March 12th and on June 30th. March 12th was advertising for the March 25th meeting, which was canceled. June 30th letters were advertising for tonight's meeting, July 15th. 2 signs were placed on the property, one on Aintree Drive side and the other on Stratford Road side. Those were placed on March 12th. It was advertised in the local Guardian newspaper on March 14th for the original meeting, and again on July 4th for tonight's meeting. Was also advertised on the town's website, Facebook, Twitter, and Stratford e-News to ensure that everyone was aware that the meeting was happening. I'll take a moment to just discuss the difference between the 2 zones that are being considered. So within the R1 zone, the as of right permitted uses are single dwellings, secondary dwelling units, home occupations, active and passive recreation, accessory buildings, private garages, and general agricultural uses. As a conditional use, which requires approval from council, you can have duplex or semi-detached dwellings up to 20% of the units in a block. So that would be, if that was to be considered, those have to go to council for consideration. They cannot be issued at staff level. As a special permitted use within this zone, you can have duplex or semi-detached dwellings up to 40% of the units in a block, neighborhood child care facilities, child care centers, convenience stores, health clinics, group homes, community care facilities, or daycare homes. These special permitted uses require a public meeting to be called and input to be heard from residents before council will give consideration to any of those uses. That is the R1 zone as it is currently zoned. The proposal is to rezone to the Planned Unit Residential Development Zone, short for PURD. The permitted uses, as of right permitted uses within this zone are single dwellings, duplex dwellings and semi-detached dwelling units, townhouse dwellings up to 6 units owned either individually or as condominiums, home occupations, home-based child care facilities, neighborhood child care facilities, active and passive recreation, parks and playgrounds, accessory buildings, private garages, public and/or private assisted care facilities. As a special permitted use within this zone, which again requires a public meeting, you could apply for group child care centers, community care facilities, public and/or private assisted care facilities, child care facilities, health clinics, multiple attached dwellings or apartments, and first floor commercial. That is the difference between the 2 zones that are being considered tonight.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin. With that, I am going to turn it over to our presenters, and we have Jody McLeod from CBCL, who is a consultant, and we have Kevin Green from Greenway Realty. Greenway Realty, and I'll ask them to do their presentation.
Thank you, Jill, Kevin. Good evening, everyone. Try not to touch my face or touch the mic and
closer. That's good.
Get through this. My name is Kevin Green, and I'm with Greenway Realty. We are the developer that was and is behind the development Southside Greens at the corner of Kinloch Road and Stratford Road, and we're the developer that's behind this proposal tonight for a development Greensview. Just going, Kevin. What am I doing to get it to move in the middle?
Sideways. One side.
There we go.
Going too far.
That's behind Greensview, a proposed development off of Aintree Drive and between there and Stratford Road. With me tonight is Jody McLeod. Jody is the managing partner of CBCL, their office here in Prince Edward Island, and Jody led up the engineering with us when we started Southside Greens originally, and him and his team have agreed to take on the engineering on this Greensview project as well. little bit of risk of being online tonight with COVID. Everything's so different. This morning, my little fella, he's 5, he asked me, "What are you doing tonight, Dad?" I said, "I'm going to a public meeting." "Wear your mask." He had the finger out right away, so if he's seeing me online, I might get in a little bit of trouble. First and foremost, anyone that's involved in development, and with you residents tonight, we want to say thank you. It's so much work from the concept design through to reality, and I know it's imposing on your lives to take your time to come here tonight and look into this and represent your own interests. We want to thank all the people. The last couple of nights I went door to door, and I think I got to meet most of the people here. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me and let me know what's important to you. And thank you to the Town Planning Department. They've been working hard on this from day one, and they've been doing a great job of strongly representing the interests of the residents in the area, and I hope that shows through tonight. It's not always perfect and simple and takes some changes and modifications to accommodate everyone, but I think we've come a long way. And also Stratford Town Councillors, I know it's a lot of work for you and responsibility to help guide these decisions through to the right outcome that best represents the town and positions the town for the future. So thank you all for your time. So what is Greenway about? We're about delivering an economical approach to maintenance-free living in executive quality homes. So what do we mean by that? Our niche product is the single-level garden home that you would see over on Kinloch Road and in Southside Greens. And that product, it's intended mainly for the 55-plus audience that's looking to downsize from their single-family home into a maintenance-free arrangement. And something that we feel is unique about it and works so well is that a lot of people, it's a significant step to leave your single-family home and go into some kind of rental arrangement, and the garden home helps them meet well in the middle. They still get that quality of single-family home with the front veranda and the back deck and a front and backyard. They have their garage, and it tends to be really popular with seniors, and we'd like to continue to provide more of that here in Stratford. So a little bit of background on these garden home communities. Again, they're focused on the 55-plus demographic. We currently have communities here in Stratford, Southside Greens, the corner of Kinloch Road and Stratford Road. And we have Riverview Terrace in Cornwall and Greenway Garden Homes in Summerside. Greenway, again, was behind the development here at Southside Greens, and we are told that the town and surrounding residents are very happy with the product we ended up with, and we have all intentions of hoping to have that outcome again with Greensview, if we're given the opportunity. So the current situation, or why are we here tonight? Greenway is proposing to expand on Southside Greens with a new development, Greensview, again in between Aintree Drive and Stratford Road. And we're here tonight to tell you about the concept design and, of course, to gather any concerns and opinions that the residents in the surrounding area have. No doubt, if everyone's here tonight, they are familiar with the parcels of land, but just in case anyone wasn't, the property outlined in black is the current Southside Greens. It's in behind the new Murphy's Medical Center and Murphy's Pharmacy and the old Home Hardware, if you will. And the property outlined in blue is the proposed Greensview in between Aintree Drive and Stratford Road. Apologize here, we weren't thinking of COVID with Jody and I. We were going to switch back and forth a couple of times with the presentation. So Jody's going to come up and talk for a minute now, and we'll have to do the swap over, Kevin.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. For those that don't know me, I am a longtime resident of Stratford, been here now for 22 years, live on the Keppoch Road in the corner of Keppoch and Aptos. Wendell Mill, longtime resident, is my neighbor, so I very much know the area. I drive by this lot, or this area, every day. I go to Sobeys, I go to the other establishments there, so A little closer? Is that better?
Or I can move this closer forward.
Is that better? Okay, sorry about that. So my role here is to try to help Kevin design a subdivision that or development that meets his needs, meets the town's needs, meets the standards of the day, and hopefully delivers a quality product. It's in my own community, and so we take great pride in developing land that way. So what we have up here right now is an overview of the land parcels. The rezoning portion of the development that Kevin is hoping to do is outlined in red up here. So that is sort of the remnant lands of this original subdivision when it occurred. When Aintree was built originally, there was a plan to have Campbell Drive come up through sort of a loop road up to Aintree and connect through there as single-family residential. This lower area in pink is the existing PERD area. So what is being proposed is suitable for this area now. The upper area outlined in red would have to be rezoned to PERD to allow that entire development to happen. So the drawing that you guys were provided in your first mail-out package had 80 units in it, and right now we're looking more like 78 units. So that is a bit of a change, and it's outlined. So there was some changes up here and down here that we'll talk about after. If we could flip back, Kevin, if you don't mind, sorry. So this parcel here, currently zoned R1, would probably, if it was developed as a single-family residential to current standards, would result in about 18 lots. Probably, if some of that was duplex, would probably be about 20 units. And as of right for this development, would allow the developer to really do that subdivision layout as long as they had 10% green space and some stormwater detention. Could really lay that out in any way as long as it met the zoning bylaws. The issue with that kind of a development would be that there's a potential that a lot of these valuable trees along this back area could really be eliminated if the developers so choose to do that. A benefit of this rezoning and public interaction is we get to understand what a lot of your important features are of this land, and we do certainly understand that along this area here is some of the nicer trees in the area, some of the older trees. So you'll see in our development plan trying to retain those. So this is the plan that would have been sent out to you people before we made a few changes, and we'll show those later. Again, we're looking at single level garden homes. The whole parcel, this whole entire development is in the order of 11.5 acres. And some of the features of the layout are that we've focused a lot of attention on green space, understanding that there's probably a desire to have a bit of a buffer between a development such as this with the single family residential. So you'll see we have about a 50 to 65 foot green buffer zone. So it ranges in width because it's a little narrower there than it is down here. So that is certainly an attempt to put in, to save some of those nice older mature trees, to provide a buffer, and to also provide some valuable green space. There is an intent, a desire to put a bit of a natural walking trail through there, if possible, and try to make that a real feature. This green space also then connects onto and links to the pond that's down here, and there's not so much a pond as a wetland. So we've been in contact with the Department of Environment. We understand what they envision is the footprint of that wetland. That wetland would be left basically as it is today, and that would also be linked in with the green space. And the development would require a stormwater detention pond, which we have in the lower area over here. So that would be essentially a dry pond. It would only have water in it during high rain events. So we arranged the development such that these things are all linked together, and we think that's a real important feature. We do see it as a bit of the different entities that kind of act as a little bit of a synergy there, where you've got some ecological benefits. It actually acts as a bit of a draw. It is a nice natural area. It combines stormwater detention with the wetland. It right now is actually a bit of a feature in that the town actually has a nice park bench here. I'm sure you know where it is, right along by the sidewalk, and I do see people often sitting there and kind of enjoying the green space as it is today. So this total package of green space is in the order of 21% of the total development land. So that would break down to about 14% actual usable green space, which would be this. And then the other two features added together is the balance of that, which I think it's a nice feature to have. The other important feature that we have is the intent to try to keep some active transportation connectivity in the development. Picturing trails through here, connectivity up at this end, and the road network itself is quite connected, so the residents can walk in the area and can enjoy the surroundings. There is a connection shown here from Aintree over to Campbell Drive. Campbell Drive or Road? Campbell. I just call it Campbell. So that is a requirement of the Department of Transportation. Anytime a subdivision is constructed with a dead-end road that has the intent to be expanded in the future, such as this development was, they require it to be connected. So the thought process from the developer's perspective is that we would like this to be a small community, a community where there's traffic calming, where there's not a lot of through traffic, where residents can get out and walk and enjoy it. So one of the main objectives for us was to try to not necessarily have that all connected together and have some independence from that road network. The upper area would just come out onto Aintree Drive, and then this lower road network would come out onto the Stratford Road. I think that's the features, Kevin. Yep.
Thank you, Jody. If I'm not clear, folks, please let me know. Normally probably wouldn't have so much material in the deck, but because this is going to be available online afterwards, we've included a lot of this content. I believe you'll be able to see it after tonight as well? Yes. Online, so that's good. This is a concept drawing done by our friends at Sable Architecture of what the community might look like at a drone-type view from the Stratford Road. Maybe with your pointer there, Jody, you can, down on Stratford Road, you can see how there's one connection where 56 of the units would come and go from the community down in that corner. And further at the back of the property, you can see the one connection off of Aintree where 22 units would come and go from there. So why Stratford and why this location? From our experience the last 5 or 6 years, there is a significant demand for the single-level garden home here in Stratford. Almost all of our units have been rented well in advance of construction completion. The town of Stratford, we really enjoy working here with the town. There's a proactive planning approach, and they're doing a great job of having good quality inventory available to help the town continue to prosper and grow, and it's a great environment as a developer for us to work within. And it's another one of the main reasons that we want to continue here in Stratford with this project and beyond. By all means, in our opinion, it is the best location in Stratford for senior-friendly living, close to the golf courses, the grocery stores, pharmacies, the town hall, recreation centers, and just a few minutes from the QEH, all very optimum features for that age group. And again, there are many seniors that are within the community and outside that are looking to downsize, but not necessarily leave the community. They want to stay close to Stratford, close to their family and friends, and have the opportunity to move into a living arrangement that is similar as possible to their traditional single-family home, and these garden homes do provide that. Why is Greensview a great addition to the town of Stratford? So Stratford is growing. The new community campus is going to bring a lot of new families here to Stratford, and by having a new development like this, it creates good inventory of new homes as the seniors downsize and move into these garden homes. There's more homes available for these new families, and of course the overall population growth adds to businesses that can prosper in Stratford. Every unit built adds to an important tax base that's required to keep our town both functional and prosperous. Greensview is entirely privately funded. There's no government grants or tax incentives whatsoever. As far as the investment to date, in Southside Greens, with what's been done so far, that's about a $16 million investment. And when that project's complete, it'll be about a $25 million investment in the town. And Greensview, with the current concept plan that you see tonight, it'll be about a $20 million investment in the town. And of course, we have to be and are working to align ourselves with the town of Stratford's official plan. And in that last point, quoting the plan, to identify opportunities for zoning residential land to allow for smaller lot sizes and higher densities without compromising the character of existing neighborhoods. In our opinion, to bring the single-level garden home into a neighborhood such as the Aintree Stratford Road area is the best possible fit as far as increasing density without bringing larger structures like multi-unit and multi-floor buildings to the area. Jody?
Had we known Kevin had to switch that, we would have changed this around. So we'll talk about it next time. So back in, as Kevin mentioned, back in March 6th, development scheme was put together. And since that time, we met with council or with planning committee and got some input from Department of Transportation and did come up with some changes to what was sent to the residents. Those two main changes actually exist up here. The first one is to reduce the impact to the property owner here. What we've done is we've removed one of the units on this last building and shortened up the road so that there's a bit more of a space there between the adjacent property owner. The other change, and it had to do with the connection road that's required, and the previous layout had a fairly sharp turn there, like you basically similar to what you have up here on Aintree. When you come in, that's a 90-degree turn. So we've changed that. We made it a bit more of a gentle curve so that we can improve the sight distance through that intersection, so, or that curve, so it now meets the Department of Transportation's requirements. So in doing so, that pushed it out a little bit this way, so another unit was removed.
Just one thing.
Sure.
Our viewers online are not seeing your laser pointer, so you could just be a little descriptive, a little more descriptive that way. It might help.
Okay, no, that's good to know.
Okay.
Thank you. So where the bubbles there, where it indicates B, that arrow points to a section where the curve was realigned. And the intent of that was to meet the Department of Transportation site distance requirements. So a unit was removed to accommodate that. As well, a treed buffer was added. You can see that it doesn't show up great on this layout, but it's the kind of a white line here at the outside of that curve to try to put some separation between the road and the new development. So those, yeah, those were covered. So what everybody's always interested with pertaining to development is always traffic flow. And we do a lot of traffic impact studies for developments, for commercial businesses. And just to talk a little bit about how we do that, we would go to a document. It's the ITE manual. It's called the Institute of Traffic Engineers Manual, and it has compilations of thousands of studies that were done across North America, and it has data on what we call trip generation for different uses. So what we do with that is we look at that and we look at the type of units or the type of development that's being proposed. We go to the manual, we identify what typical trips get generated, and we use that data to come up with our predictions of what the traffic flow or the impacts of the traffic would be based on what is being developed. So knowing that the parcel that's being rezoned was single-family residential, we want to minimize any impact of increased units from that area. So from a layout perspective, what we thought was quite important was that we minimize impacts on Aintree Drive. So we separated the road network such that on the north side, there's a private road that tees into the Aintree Drive closest to the Kinloch Road. And then the majority of the traffic, or the bulk of the traffic, from the lower area then exits onto the Stratford Road. That was a very deliberate move by the developer to try to minimize that impact of traffic on Aintree. It also prevents cut-through traffic through this area and is able to have a bit of a traffic calming effect. Excuse me. So, when I talk about trip generation, this is kind of the dry part of the presentation, but what we do is we assign land use to this. So this type of development is what we would call a senior adult housing type development. And the type of people that they market to and that we've certainly seen embrace the development next door is that 55 plus person who really they're retired or semi-retired. So the driving habits of that type person that we see from our traffic studies is that they're not driving at the typical peak traffic time. So you think of a standard residential subdivision with families of my size, two kids, husband and wife that maybe all work. Those trips often, or the majority of those trips, get generated in the morning peak and the evening peak. So that's sort of the 8:30-ish in the morning and the 5 o'clock in the evening time. And so those are the two periods that we really look at to see what impact we're going to have on traffic. So when we look at a seniors adult housing type development, often the trips that come from that type of development are spread out more throughout the day. So your retired person isn't off at 8:30 heading to work. Often they're, maybe a little later in the day. We have less trips that get generated from them, and they're spread out so that they're usually off, what we call off-peak. So we went through the process and really saw that the number of units that would be that would go out onto Aintree Drive in this scenario ends up being about 16. No, I'm lying. Sorry about that. 22, just found it, exactly. Are you? Perfect. 9, right. So it's about 22 units. You have to remember now, so we talked about the single-family residential. You could probably get about 20 if it was a single-family residential development. So what really discharges onto Aintree is about the same number of units if it was single-family. With the residential, with the residential units, again, your higher peak, the traffic would happen at your peak times a little more so than a senior's home or senior's housing. So we're seeing a reduction actually in the amount of traffic that you would get here versus what you would get if it was single-family residential. We're looking at, on average, exiting onto Aintree Drive anywhere between 5 to 6 cars during that peak period, because the majority would be off-peak. And if it was single-family residential, you'd be looking at probably somewhere in the order of 16. So there's almost a 3-fold reduction from one development to the other type development. So our desires are to reduce that impact on Aintree and certainly discharge onto Stratford Road. The Stratford Road has lots of capacity to take the vehicles. That's sort of a collector road in Stratford. We all know there's quite a bit of traffic on it. The railroad, the lanes are wide, the shoulders are wide, so we felt that discharging onto Stratford Road was a benefit. The added traffic onto Aintree probably would result, if we're talking about an average of maybe onto Aintree, we were saying 5 to 6. So that's, if you can put it in perspective, during that peak hour, that's about 1 every 10 minutes. If it was 5 or 6 cars, 60 minutes per hour. So that's the kind of change that we would see on Aintree. What's on the next? So we did spend a significant amount of time looking at traffic. We do know that that's always important. I live on the Kepwick Road and Aptos, so I have lots of traffic in front of my house. The only reason I bought it is there's about an 8-foot hedge there that kind of keeps me buffered from it, so we get it. Some of those guiding principles that we followed, we tried to not have through traffic in the development, and try to have that peaceful, relaxing community that people can get out and walk and utilize, and also an area that I think the local residents could come and walk through and enjoy as well. And of course, minimize the impact to the residents on Aintree as best we could. I guess in a nutshell, the impact is sort of negligible in terms of the number of vehicles you would see during those peak hours, although there would be a small increase. I think that's it. Turn it over to Kevin.
That's our last trade-off during the presentation, Kevin. You're clear now. Coffee delivered soon. Just take a couple of slides to tell you a little bit about Southside Greens, the current community over there today. So this picture in the upper left-hand corner is a picture of the current state over there. In this picture, the grass isn't quite as grown in, but as you can see from the picture, there is a lot of green space there. And the picture in the lower part of the screen shows the proximity to a lot of the businesses in the area. And in the upper right-hand side, just to share a little bit about what life is like at Southside Greens, the community engagement is starting to take place. So in the beginning, we had staff and different members trying to organize social events to help with the enjoyment of citizens in the community. But just as we hope, that's taken off now, and each community has a social committee, and there's Christmas parties, there's fall parties, summer parties. Recently, they got together and brought us a strong case that they wanted to add a horseshoe pit to the community as something else for people to enjoy, and we helped them and got that put in place. Here's a picture in the upper left-hand corner of the current pond that's been a great, both functional and cosmetic addition to the community and to the town at that corner of Kinloch and Stratford. And the bottom right-hand corner is the current single-level garden home. And again, This proposed development is for entirely single-level garden homes in Greensview. We're not looking for any other product type. Here's just a couple of images of what the units look like inside. The upper left-hand corner is from the living room looking out into the dining room kitchen area. The lower right-hand corner is the reverse of that. And the upper right-hand side is actually a picture from out in Cornwall and Riverview Terrace. This is another rendering from Sable Arc, and it's a street-level view of what the community might look like when you're driving by Stratford Road. This image is from down in the community. It's with the trail within that green park space buffer that would run in behind the homes in Kinloch Road on the east side of the property. And it would allow the residents and public to be able to access right from the community in up onto Aintree and hopefully get over onto the Stratford Trail system. I know from a family now myself, the last couple of years, we use that a few times a week. It's so great for biking and getting out with the family. And this image is where the private road in the proposed Greensview would meet with Aintree. We do, of course, want to have connectivity between the new Greensview and the existing community, and that's what the trail is there for. But we do want a level of separation so it's a clear boundary as far as the roads, and that's what the buffer of trees is proposed for. So some key considerations with Greensview. Why is Greensview the right choice for existing neighbors in the area? So again, we target the 55 plus demographic. It's lower volumes of traffic and reasonably quiet neighbors. The communities are professionally maintained with live-in property managers. And for anyone that does travel in the winter, hopefully the world gets back to that case, we have people that help look after the units and make things are taken care of while they're away. Again, want to be clear in the commitment that these will be completely single-level garden homes. It's a product that should be familiar to you, and if you haven't, we encourage you to please go take a walk through Southside Greens and see what the community feel is like there. That's what we're looking to recreate in Greensview. And Greenway is an experienced builder with a track record of respecting the neighbors. Certainly any guidelines put in place by the town of when heavy equipment can operate and any other related rules, we look to abide by them well. From everything we hear and from our own opinion, all the Greenway builds are a high quality product. We have a good relationship with the town building inspector. Carter's here tonight. We have and do want to continue to follow all of the codes and guidelines put in place by the town to ensure that we're delivering the best product that we can. All the garden homes have air-to-air heat pumps, and it's a good, safe, clean, environmentally friendly heating and air conditioning solution. We do respect the existing neighbors in the area, and that's part of why we're here tonight. It's why I was out talking to you folks the last few days. We can't change everything to accommodate needs, but we definitely want to hear from you and hear if there are adjustments we can make to deal with some of the concerns that you may have. We manage all of our properties, and we do not allow any Greenway managed properties to be listed on Airbnb or VRBO or anything like that. It's all permanent residents that are leased with us. We are proud members of the community, and we want to continue to be that way. Southside Greens and Greenway, we have and will want to continue to sponsor important projects like the Stratford new playground at Glen Stewart. And from some discussions I've had the last couple of nights, I think there are some residents that are interested in this. But for anyone in the existing area, we'd be more than happy to put you at the top of the list if there's a particular unit or placement that you'd be interested in within the development. And I know the move type thing is such a change for people, but the build's going to take a number of years to pan out, so it could be a long-term decision for some. Again, continue on that. The single-level garden home is the least invasive way to help add some density to this important and unique piece of land in Stratford. The design includes combination 2, 4, and 5 unit buildings. We do respect the environment. We're in our 5th year developing here in the town of Stratford. We've developed a great relationship both with the town and with the Provincial Department of Environment, and we've heard feedback from both that we're doing a very good job of adhering to the rules and guidelines they put in place. And we really believe that providing the garden home option to seniors to be able to come live in Stratford so close to the amenities and the services is a very valuable thing. We see them enjoying it day to day. There's a lot of good neighbor helping neighbor type thing and active social committees. As far as design and amenities, watching the last number of communities that we've developed, we've gotten the message clear from our residents that they like the ability to get out and safely walk around the community. They don't want the flow through traffic, and that's both for exercise and also for just safely getting around the community, visiting with their neighbors. Of course, active living is an important part of life, and the world's becoming more and more aware of that, and we are too. We're open to working with the town to install and sponsor workout stations or public art on the trail system or within the green space. And I spoke about the Horseshoe Pit that was recently put in, and a gazebo is planned to be built in the current Southside Greens public space. And hope to do that sooner than later. PEI being what it is, we all tend to know each other, a connection to each other. This slide has the list of the names of the members of the Greenway team. If there happens to be someone you know and you'd like to ask them questions or learn a little more about what we do, please feel free to reach out to them. And we had been hoping originally before COVID to have some of our residents come and talk tonight about their experience living at Southside Greens. Of course, they couldn't be and we weren't sure, so we got a video done with a few testimonials that we'll share with you. It's just about 2 minutes long, and then I will stop talking, and anyone has questions, we'll do our best to answer.
Yeah, Kevin, just one question that came in that just to save a mic slip swap. Dan Larder, 1 Beacon Hill Drive, how much would each unit rent for? He's asking.
They rent approximately $1,700 to $1,800.
Okay.
That includes heat, all your typical water, sewer, property insurance, property tax, etc., snow removal, grass cutting. You pay your own domestic electric, so your fridge, your stove, and you pay your own internet and cable.
All right, thanks.
My name is Kathy Sprague, and I've lived in Stratford for 43 years. My name is Elaine Goody, and I lived in Stratford. My husband and I and family lived in Stratford for 45 years, and we're always hoping we had something that's in Stratford to retire to, and here we are, and it's lovely. Living here at Southside Greens, we do not have to worry about cutting the grass, doing snow removal, or anything like that. Greenway, all you have to do is call our maintenance man here, and he is here, and it's great. Anytime I've gotten in touch with Greenway Realty, the response has been quick and efficient and helpful. So they're very good to work with. Residents enjoy the fact that it's very quiet. We have green space, and I take my grandchildren down to see the ducks and the babies, which is great fun for them. We have lots of privacy, and there's lots of green space here, and there's no through traffic. We don't want through traffic. The fact that the streets that are away from the heavy traffic is appreciated by a lot of the residents. It gives them a quiet area to live. We have a great sense of community here, and when grandchildren who love to come and visit all their grandparents, and we can go down to the pond. It has grown into a welcoming community for anybody that moves in. We look out for each other, and we're not being nosy or anything like that, but we do look out for one another. It's great.
All right, and I'm going to assume that concludes your presentation, does it? Okay. All right, moving on, I am going to open the floor for questions from the residents. Again, we're going to ask you to come up to the mic so everyone can benefit from that question, and state your address, and Kevin will worry about the swapping in and out. I did have, to start things off, if people aren't ready, I did have another one come in. Jennifer Giddings, 42 Aintree Drive. Could a cul-de-sac be considered instead of connecting Aintree to Campbell? Our household likes this plan for senior gardening homes much more than several previous plans that have been considered. However, we do not want a connection to Campbell, especially as so much care seems to have been taken by the developers to minimize the amount of added traffic to Aintree. So I don't know which one of you would like to speak to that, or maybe Kevin.
Yeah.
Kevin might be the guy. Yeah, we'll let Kevin go with that.
Okay. We've had a lot of discussions with different developers over the years about this connection between Aintree Drive and Campbell Drive. When the subdivisions were planned many years ago, this connection was always in that plan. So it's something that both the Department of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy and the town support. We support the connectivity between neighborhoods. We don't intend to have those connections to become shortcuts or to become traffic issues within local neighborhoods, but they are simply connections between neighborhoods. We've had many instances over the years where we've had people really strongly oppose the connections between neighborhoods that were always planned to be there. After they were in, they didn't turn out to be as negative as people once thought. The issue that we have with this connection is that, and I'll use my pointer here so people online can see as well, Campbell Drive is currently at a dead end. It's a paved dead end, and the right-of-way is left on Aintree for that connection to happen. And Aintree is currently a dead end right here. So we cannot leave them as dead ends. So if there's going to be development happen around them, we either have to put cul-de-sacs on the end of them so service vehicles can turn in them, or we have to make them connect. We've had the discussion with the developer. We've had Department of Transportation involved in the discussion. I think ultimately the developer would probably prefer not to connect them, but it does mean that there would have to be a redesign done to put a turnaround point on the end of Aintree and a turnaround point on the end of Campbell. And if you tried to do that with a public road standard, they would essentially intersect each other. Although they're disconnecting their private roads from the public road, the town does support the connection between the neighborhoods. At the end of the day, it's a Department of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy and town decision. So we do understand that is not what everybody necessarily agrees with, but there are reasons why we want the connections to happen.
If you, please come on up to the mic. I think it's all.
We can't hear you, and the people online can't hear you if you don't come up.
No one wants this connection. We do not want this connection. All Aintree Drive citizens, all Greensview Drive citizens do not want this connection. And it's important reason why. We all have kids, a lot on Aintree Drive and a lot on Greensview Drive. This connection killed our one-way road. This connection will allow people who goes from Stratford, goes through Aintree Drive, through Campbell Drive to Greensview, because this four-way intersection stop sign between Kinloch and Stratford Road is always full, and people will go short way this way, who goes to the Capach Road and another way. I have kids who drive bicycle in my Greensview Drive, and I will not allow them to do it anymore. And we bought this house just 3 years ago for this reason, that this drive that this road is pretty closed and it's very safe. And it's not like what Stratford and transportation, we all do not want it. It's important for us. If it's the reason that it has to be because of development going, we want to have seniors, our neighbors, and it's a great idea, but we do not want this connection at all.
Okay, thank you.
I have more questions.
Sure.
Kevin Green shows us, or Jody showed us buffer, green buffer,
Yes.
between townhouses and a new development. Between our street, Greensview, and the free townhouses, it's no green buffer. We also want a green buffer. It's fair, yes?
Sorry, yeah, well, did you
Yeah,
have,
let's go
did
with
you
all
have
the
any more
questions.
questions? And then what we'll do is we'll get you to state all your questions, and then we'll get.
Okay, so we do not want this connection. We want green buffer from Greensview as well. It's at least fair. Also, when you shows your Kinlock, when you showed your Kinlock townhouses, it's a 0 trees in this area. And when you show these pictures, it's like a lot of trees. It's like wonderful. I want to see that those pictures is related to be true, to have a lot of trees saved in this area, not just in a buffer. Like in a front yard, you showed a lot of trees, between townhouses, a lot of trees, and in the other hand, on a Kinlock, 0. You want to understand where it will be look like a plan, or it will be look like Kinlock.
Thank you for your comments, and I'll ask if Kevin or Jody wanted to speak to any of those concerns regarding the buffer and well, I guess Kevin kind of spoke to the continuation of the road, the connection of the road, but it was your green buffer.
And the trees.
And the trees, yeah.
Thank you. Regarding the buffer, I don't have the measurement with me, but the buffer on Kinlock Road is because we're going right against those homes. Over on the Greensview side, there's another large parcel of land between the development and Greensview. Quick guess is it looks like it's a good bit wider than the green buffer that we're offering on the other side. That's the logic. As far as the trees go, there was very few trees on the Smallwood property before the development, so that's why it looks like there's a lot of trees here and there's none there. But on the topic, that's why we're out talking to people and trying to gather this information. I can't promise where every tree is going to be when we're done, but we can hear where you want trees, try our best to save them, and do some commitments on planting trees in certain areas. So happy to hear it and happy to talk more about it on specific areas, but no, I couldn't explain in detail every tree on the property.
Thank you. Mic's open. Oh.
Sorry.
Hi there. Close enough?
That's good.
Perfect.
I live 2 doors away from Maria, who just spoke, and her concern in respect of the Campbell Drive connection is really paramount for us. I'm open to obviously discussion on it, but I don't understand the explanation that we need to do a traffic circle or something of that nature for turning vehicles. We've lived there for 13 years with Campbell being a dead end and Aintree connecting the same. It's odd to me to suggest that the redesignation somehow requires a new turning lane for emergency vehicles. We've been fine for 13 or 50 some odd years before then. The other real practical aspect is we've actually required speed bumps at different times on Greensview, and I also own a property on Campbell Drive, so I see that on both sides, right? And it is that traffic piece that is a real concern to us. There's a lot of small children in our neighborhood. We've needed that bump at different times to try to keep the traffic volume Down, I mean, I can tell you personally, I've actually had to go and speak to different drivers for whatever reason. And the point Maria makes is actually a very good one, right? So where you're driving down Kinloch, if you're not coming, you know, in that peak hours post-work after, you know, say 5 o'clock, you can very easily find 20 cars lined up at that Kinloch Road intersection, and they'll look for the easiest way to jump between spaces, right, or vice versa. Appreciating that traffic is a concern for everybody, but it's a very acute concern for us because of the demographic that lives there in our particular space. I don't have negative comments about the design. Frankly, I do think a similar question of as Maria, right, where the border on the 3 development side as to what that would look like beside it, right? Is there some sort of a landscaping feature? There's not. I know there's some trees that run along Doug's property there, but whether there's any further into the design that would provide even a cosmetic barrier, because I know one of the pieces of your rezoning is to keep the character of the community, and I think that making sure that that's a more natural flow is an important part of that. Appreciate we don't have the green space on that left side that you do naturally on the right side, so I can't obviously pin you to where you're going to put each individual tree, but that's an important piece, right? Whether that's some sort of a berm or a plant piece, that's part of the development. I think it would help cosmetically appreciate the 2 places, right, for how the communities line up. That's probably it.
Thanks, Carrie. Speaking to, has there been any modeling done on the Kinloch intersection that would, any traffic modeling done on that particular intersection that would speak to the traffic flowing or shortcutting through that subdivision?
So we didn't do any traffic modeling on that. I know that the Department of Transportation has looked at it a number of years ago, and they are doing a lot of work around this general area, making the connection from McKinnon Drive down to Glen Stewart Drive, as well as a connection from McKinnon over to Marion Drive to try to improve the connectivity around this area. And I'm not trying to speak for Department of Transportation about their decision making, but I do know that they are trying to make alternate connections in the town so that you don't have sort of that one big loop that you have from the Trans-Canada to Kinloch to Stratford Road and back around. And there are some other planned interconnections that I do know of. In terms of the four-way stop, I don't know if they've ever looked at the level of service on that. I do want to, though, mention something from the tree buffer perspective that I don't know if Kevin really, let's say you didn't do a good job on, but one thing you may not have thought of is on the subdivision plan, you'll notice almost at the very top, there is your road that comes in from Aintree Drive, yeah, and then there's a bigger unit here and a duplex unit here. This area in behind, Kevin, do you want to put your pointer up there?
Okay.
You can just follow me.
I just can't see you.
I know. That area up there is treed now, and I would highly suspect that a number of those trees will remain. We don't have that shown as green space because it wouldn't really be as public as this kind of green space. It would be a sort of backyards for these people. But as you can notice, there's a very large area there that wouldn't have to be disturbed. Also, Kevin, if you move down to where the A is, there aren't trees in here now, but that is a fairly wide buffer as well. That's, I think, 15 meters, so that's about 50 feet as well. So there is some separation there, although it's not as evident as it is when we highlight it bright green. And then, of course, this area here is not against any, I know most of the concerns are on Aintree, but where these lots are here, they're not really against many residents as well. So we did try to provide that buffer as well. We focused on this side because of the age of those trees, and they're a very mature stand, and we tried to respect that.
While I have you up there, another one in from Patsy Bulger-Gallant, 5 Aintree. So I'm not sure which house that is, but I've lived on Aintree for 24 years and wonder, when you cut down the trees behind us, will you leave a tree buffer for us on Aintree, or will it be clear cut to our property lines? I have many animal visitors and wonder what protocols, safeguards you put in place to ensure wildlife behind us are unharmed and/or are moved to a safe place before you start clearing. Who is responsible to preserve our wildlife?
I think this is Patsy's property I have highlighted here.
So a portion of those trees behind her would be removed for these units, but then of course this buffer would remain. And I do think that this buffer, she talks about wildlife, and I think that's a good point. We did try to make connected buffers. Sorry, Kev. Oh yeah, okay.
Whoops. Sorry, folks.
So, yeah. So this is where we're talking. There are a number of trees that would come out for those units. I guess what my point was, by trying to have all this green space connected, that roll's kind of funny, Kevin, have this green space connected, it does provide connectivity for wildlife and animals to move from one area to the other. What's not shown on the drawing or on the sketch is the golf course property and Moore's Pond, and that all becomes sort of a connected entity now. So there is some connectivity. I'm a big fan of that. Instead of having little pocket parks strewn throughout subdivisions, you get a bit of a synergy by having that natural connection.
Thank you. Mic is open.
Why don't you keep that?
The developers are talking about this green space that they're putting up there on behind the residence on Kinloch Road, like it's some wonderful thing.
Can we get you to remove your mask just so anybody online can see your lips move? Thank you.
Like it's some wonderful thing. It's old growth forest. The leaves are way up in the air. At ground level, there's nothing but dead trees on the floor of the forest, and there's no privacy there. He wants to put in 78 units in behind us. My wife and I built this house in '74. We've lived there ever since. And around about '75, something happened in the town of Southport. Something happened, somebody was developing something, and I said, I was concerned, you know, all this property behind us, am I going to end up with a factory in my backyard someday? And I did a little checking, and I was told, no, it's all zoned single-family dwellings, the same as what you have, single-family dwelling. So for the last 45 years, I've been fairly happy here and figure that's all that's going to be behind us. But they want to put this property in here now with an awful lot more people than the single-family homes would be. Last summer, there was a developer wanted to put in a development, and everybody approved it because he was going to leave 80% of the woods. And he was going to put in somewhere around 20 units, I think, or something. That's what this property is meant for. So I strongly urge the council not to sell us old-time residents of Stratford out by approving this development. Thank you.
Thank you.
comments. One on the connectivity. So my wife and I had this land. We did try to do that other development. It's a nightmare dealing with the province on these things. It's a major part of my marriage, separating after 21 years. That development's not going ahead. I tried to do it the best I possibly could for the residents. It was well received. It made it so tight on dollars that when the province puts extra pressure on you, it couldn't be developed. The developer, it has to be a cooperation each way. I really wanted to put that development in there. We were going to put our house in there. It was just a major strain. So we are passed it on to another developer. On the connectivity, again, in my own backyard, I live in Pondside, and they put a new subdivision in behind. I was actually chair of planning. When that was first presented to us, there was no connectivity to our subdivision. Then when it went to the province forced them to make a connectivity. I still voted for the approval of this, even though it connected 2 houses down from me, the connectivity. I can tell you, after that went in, there are maybe a few houses coming, because that actually connects 2 new subdivisions into our subdivision. So we would get them coming through sometimes, but we also go the other way to Pownell Rink. So I used to, for 10 years, I'd go out the same street every day. Now, no matter, depends on where I'm going, I go a different direction. On this one here, I'm not sure if that'll ever connect through, but I'll tell you, you'll probably find more benefit from it. I know change is really hard to receive, but you will find as residents, you don't get people coming into these subdivisions just to drive around usually. They usually come in because they live there, and it'll give the residents another direction out. I know when I was doing the development myself, the province said it had to be developed, that you see that they have it going up to the end of the road. That's a requirement, not from the developers, but from either the municipality or the province. But in my case, when I was on planning at that time, voted for the approval, even though it was 2 yards down, 2 houses down from me, and it was a benefit to have that connectivity. So I wouldn't be overly afraid about the extra connection.
Thank you, Keith. I do have another, while we switch up there, I have another question in. Mary Hughes, 105 Stratford Road. Your first buildings are, and this is directed to the developers, your first buildings are so barren of trees. I sure hope you do all you can to maintain the beautiful old trees on this property. It would have been nice to have some connection with the Stratford Area Watershed Group when looking at the wetland and detention pond. We worked with you on the first building. You did to improve retention detention ponds. Would you work with the Stratford Area Watershed Improvement Group to protect these old trees? So I'll get you to speak to that.
Certainly, as before, we would be happy to work with the Watershed Group again and try and find a solution that meets their needs and fits with the development. Yes.
Thank you. And I do have another one while I have, and this might be more you, Kevin. Dan Larder, 1 Beacon Hill Drive. Is there any plan to convert a 4-way stop on Stratford Road and Kinloch intersection into a traffic circle to improve traffic flow? As it is, the traffic backs up to the Aintree Street at peak times. Traffic will increase both on Kinloch coming out of Aintree and Stratford Road. I guess we did kind of speak to this. Now, as I'm reading it, we did kind of speak to that, and that's probably more left in the province's hands.
Yeah, as the roads in Stratford are owned and operated by the province BEI, we would have to direct that question to them.
Yeah.
I know when the original Southside Green development was done and the pond was designed on the corner, there was consideration given if there was ever to be a traffic circle at that intersection, that the pond was back far enough so that could happen. So that was many years ago. As far as the priority of when something happens at that intersection, I again would have to defer to Department of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from the floor, or sure, go ahead. Yeah, please. Just so everyone can hear and It's recorded.
I'm Wayne, Wayne McKay, and I'm a neighbor of the other Wayne. Where are you? Okay. I just wanted to back his story up. And I know Wayne and I have both been on that particular area, him for 4 years more than me, so he's got seniority. But we are not trying to put anybody into unemployment, but we like it the way it is, as far as the Aintree Drive and the frontage on the Stratford Road, or the whatever. Anyway, I just wanted to add that to it. I don't like to see our position go with not enough support. Thank you.
Thank you. No, it's good to reiterate for sure and ensure those concerns are being brought forward. I appreciate that. There doesn't look like there's anything more coming in online, so there you go.
That this construction as well will go on for years. I'm 23 Kinloch, sorry, I'm on 23 Kinloch Road, and the woods behind me is very important. And I know the construction in our area has been incredible since we moved there. Probably, what, 28 years ago. And when there was no development and no access to the Trans-Canada. So we've noticed an awful lot of extra traffic, and we can't get out of our driveway lots of times. I know you can't stop development, and you know, we don't have control over a lot of it, but things like our land value, you know, certainly may take a hit, property value. The other thing that's really important is, to me, and I'm sure to a lot of people here, because a lot of people feed the birds and like to see you know, some of the wildlife go through your yard. And by losing this entire woods, because basically what you will be doing, as far as I could tell, will be clear cutting to put your properties in place. Is that fairly safe to say that there won't be any trees left other than the buffer zone? And therefore, you know, even the people that rent your space, I'm sure they would appreciate a few more trees too, so they can have their share of the wildlife. And I know there's fox dens in the woods, and you know, other types of wildlife. Some of it we perhaps can do without, but you know, having the birds, and they have to have a natural space to live in, and if there's no trees within that entire area, we're going to lose a lot of our birds and our not, you know, our nicer wildlife. So to me, that's a pretty big, that's a painful experience to lose all the wildlife. So if you're able to leave any trees in around any of the properties, and one of the pictures here shows, it looks like the path coming up in the buffer zone. The path that's
Just make
showing
sure you're
here.
close enough to the mic so
Oh, sorry. The path that's showing here is a very formal path that looks like it has grass around it, and the trees are all, there's no vegetation that's wild at all. And to me, that looks very groomed. So there's nothing to buffer the noise of all the extra people and their vehicles, you know, whether we have people across the road from us that have a Mustang, it's very loud. There's a motorbike, like you can hear that, it rumbles your house. So to have this many people behind us, and for all the residents that have lived there for so long, I'm hoping that you're able to maybe leave the wild space or the buffer zone as wild as possible. You know, if you have to make a little garden path, but does it have to be a concrete, you know, like
make it as natural as possible so that we can keep our wildlife there. You know, we're going to lose a lot of it. I can guarantee you, because when I look across the road, there's no birds flying around in anyone's property. It's very sparse, and unless somebody's actually feeding them and they see the feeder, they may be there, but otherwise, they're gone, you know. And we lose our woods, we're losing our foxes and our squirrels and chipmunks and our birds and other wildlife that makes it natural. So that's my, you know, I mean, I'm glad there's going to be a green space buffer there because it's really important that we have that and everything's not clear cut. So I really appreciate what you are doing. I'm just hoping you can try and keep it as natural as possible and save what wildlife we have, or some of it at least. Okay, thank you.
I appreciate your comments. While we switch it up, I do have one little comment that comes to this. My husband's been working from home, and we work with counterparts out in Calgary, and they were having a conference call, managers meeting, and he opened the windows because it was hot down the basement in his office. And on the conference call, his mic's on, the birds were going, and everyone else in the conference call says, "Is someone working in a forest today?" Because you could hear all the birds tweeting. And he said, "No, I just opened my window." And he said, "I can turn my mic on mute." And they're like, "No, no, no, leave it. It's nice." So I thought that was kind of a funny thing. And you don't get that back. And I can appreciate that. Go ahead. Yes, if you could speak to her comments, that'd be great.
I might raise that some. To speak to those comments, the artist or the architect's image that was shown there is just an image. When we talked about the connectivity through there and trails, if you could find, Kevin, actually instead of
this one?
Yeah, that one. But if you could go to the development plan. You'll notice on the development plan, we don't really have this shown as a sidewalk. It's kind of a meandering kind of trail through there. What we have spoken with the developer about, that was intentional, and the reason being that we don't really know what that path is going to take because we're envisioning the development happen. The trees get cleaned up some around there. There are a lot of fallen trees that you would probably remove. And I think that would be probably a natural trail depending on the meandering of the trees and where it makes sense to go. I don't see why you couldn't take that trail and make it more of a non-landscape type trail that could be a little more natural. And I'm sure Kevin would be interested in that. There are an awful lot of paved trails, sidewalks around that that certainly don't have that feature. I did also want to have a quick, brief comment on Keith's comment about connectivity and connecting subdivisions. Living on Keppick Road across from Pondside Park, Phase 1, 2, 3, however many phases there were that we lived through there, it certainly is something that you're thinking will create traffic and increase traffic flow through your subdivision and have an impact on children that might be playing, you know, out in your front lawn. What I really noticed with my own kids growing up on Keppick Road with the only main connector to their friends and their friends' subdivisions being the Keppick Road, was that when those subdivisions started getting connected, I felt much safer with my kid driving to school because they could get through the residential streets on their bikes, and speeds were more respected there than they certainly are on the Kinloch Road. So there are some advantages to that, and that interconnectivity can be can benefit subdivisions. You can leave Aintree, you could get over to Campbell, you could get onto the trail system across the highway. So there are some advantages there, although with every advantage, there's sometimes a counterbalance there. So just to jump on Keith's comment about connectivity, there are benefits as well.
Thank you, Jody. We are sitting at 8:57. Is there anyone that would like to speak before we start to wrap up?
Do we allow to get independent traffic expertise? How near intersections will be impacted by development of 78 units? Like, usually I thought it's a standard law procedure to have an independent traffic expertise.
I might be able to address that a little bit. This development, any of the traffic numbers have to be approved by the Provincial Department of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy. So there's been a traffic statement that has been prepared by the engineer for this development. We have forwarded that to the Department of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy, and we've not heard any issues that they've had with the proposal. So not every development requires a in-depth, detailed traffic proposal, primarily because this development, the majority of the units within this are accessing onto Stratford Road, which is considered a secondary collector road within the town. So it isn't something that's not given any consideration. It is considered from the province's perspective. So if there was anything there they felt they would need more detail on, they would trigger the developer to do a more detailed traffic analysis if it was warranted. So your question was get an answer about the connection? Yeah. Again, I mean, that's something that the developer has to work through with the town and the Department of Transportation. You know, I certainly understand people's concerns with connectivities, but I think there's been a couple of people that spoke tonight about the benefits of the connectivity as well. It's not just for the automobile. So at the end of the day, that final decision does rest with the Department of Transportation. I mean, the town can certainly, town council can certainly make a decision that they would like to see it one way or the other, connected or not connected. But at the end of the day, the final decision does land with the Department of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy. When will the answer be on that connectivity? First of all, we're only dealing with a rezoning proposal tonight. So we are kind of getting into the weeds of what the development could look like. But, you know, if the rezoning proposal goes through, then the more detailed design has to be analyzed a little bit more. But there has been a fair level of discussion with the provincial government on the connectivity of the road, and some of the comments that Jody made tonight in regards to the curve of that connected street, those revisions have been made because of the feedback that's been given by the Department of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy. So I think they're supporting the connection. I think their answer is they want to see the connection. Of course, any comments that are received from this public meeting will be forwarded to Planning Board and Council. And, you know, when it comes to doing a detailed analysis on the design, that will be, once again, discussed with the province. But in their preliminary discussions, they want to see the connection there.
I did have one question come in online. Melanie McCarthy, Keppick Road. Town of Stratford developed a natural area lens strategy a couple of years ago, and there was direction on keeping green and forested spaces for long-term protection. How does this relate to the Redden and Aintree developments? And I guess I can speak somewhat to that. We did a strategic priority list Council went through earlier this year, and the natural area lens strategy we put as a high priority, a first priority as a council. So that is a project that is going to move forward on a high priority. Now is the time to look at a natural area lens. Probably should have been done before now, but that has been identified as a high priority. How does it relate to the Redden and Aintree developments? I would say, and Kevin can chime in anytime, but I would say that staff do work very closely with developers to try to ensure as many trees and natural areas are protected within sites as best they can. In the Redham Meadows, protecting that active transportation lane and not having a road cut through it, although it does cause concern for traffic and having one way in and out. It does protect that active transportation corridor, which we identify as a wildlife corridor. And there's a forested area that is being protected and dedicated as dedicated lands. In that particular development, in Aintree, they are trying to protect the mature stand of trees there. So efforts are being made there. Are we where we need to be? That's a big question, but I would say that yes, efforts are being made, and this has been made a priority by council at this time. I don't know if you want to elaborate at all.
No, I think that's, you know, it's just not been implemented yet. I think that's the easiest, you know, but council did prioritize it, and you know, it is something that, and we even have a new staff person that's just recently coming online with the town, that I expect that will be one of their high priority items to work on. So yes, it was developed, it's just not been fully implemented yet.
Yeah, that's a key point. We did budget for, we now have an environmental and sustainable coordinator whose job is going to be to implement that strategy. So I think that's a good thing. Are there any more questions from the floor?
Hi, Ralph McDonald from Aintree Drive. My house is just above the A. To give a bit more green space, your green space buffer where it says 50 to 65 feet, that's probably a 4-unit spot there. Make that a 3. You got another 40 or 50 feet for the people there. Regarding the public right-of-way that the Department of Highways wants to put in there, just pave the end of the lot there so trucks can turn around. It's just a mud pit right now. That's all they need. Once you put that connectivity there, you can't take it away. It's done. So we don't need it. You know, just stop it right now. That's their suggestion. Our suggestion, I think, from a lot of the people, they don't want it. And
Yeah, we hear your comments, and we will pass them all along. We understand.
so that's what I have to say.
The connectivity in the official plan does encourage connectivity. So that is, and in looking at these applications and rezoning applications that were dealt with as a council, there's a list of 13, I think it's 13 criteria that we have to satisfy. And one key one is hearing residents and poring over residents' concerns and making sure they're brought forward and discussed. That's one of them. Another one is aligning with the official plan. And when that official plan went through, it does encourage connectivity of neighborhoods through streets. So that would be, there's DOT and then there's the official plan. Those are two, I'm just saying those are two considerations. I'm not saying that it's a bad idea to leave that out and not connect them at this time, but I just know those would be two considerations that we'd have to take into. What's that? I'm not a traffic engineer. I wish I was before I took this job.
Maybe we'll repeat that question.
Oh, sorry.
Just in the mic.
Yeah,
so
sorry. So he's saying, will traffic flow go up or down in that area, is what he's asking. And
I'm not a traffic engineer
I'm not
either,
an expert.
but I will. Okay, just give us a second. Just give us a second. Okay, so there will absolutely be an increase in traffic on your street. There's no, you know, I deal in common sense. Of course there will be an increase in traffic on your street. Will it cause a safety concern? That's that's really more for the transportation people to be able to answer, but an increase in traffic does not directly relate to a decrease in safety. No, I'll defer to the professionals in the room if they choose to do that. It's not their role. It's the role of Department of Transportation, Infrastructure, and Energy, as they own the roads. But we've been through a fairly detailed discussion on this with this developer, with a previous developer, and with a previous developer before that. When these subdivisions were designed many years ago, these points were left as access points for the two neighborhoods to connect. I can't undo the way the subdivision was designed years ago, but when we design new subdivisions today, we always leave connection points to the next parcel of land so the neighborhoods can connect. We've heard a couple of people talk tonight about after the connectivity is there, it's not what people think. It's not a shortcut for people to be able to cut through. I'm not saying people won't do it, but the majority of the people will drive to the intersection and they'll make the right-hand turn and they'll go there. They won't go through your local neighborhood. You may find that you have more kids going through your neighborhood, on bikes or people walking or things like that because it's a safer local street. Although the Kinloch and Stratford roads are both relatively safe with sidewalks on them, we're going to have a difference of opinion on this, and at the end of the day, the Department of Transportation is going to make the decision.
Hi.
So the question that was asked was, if it's been this way for years, why now would the new development make the connection happen? It's because the land that's between the two connection points is currently under a proposal to be developed. So that is when the connection does get made, right? The Aintree subdivision was developed in a phase, I expect. I don't know, but it was, there was an original plan for this area that it was connecting to the land next to it. And when Campbell Drive was developed, it was designed that it was going to connect Aintree, and that's why the leg of Campbell Drive dead ends the way it does. So I can't answer it in any more detail than that.
With that, folks, I have no more questions coming in online. I think what I'll do is I'll go through the next steps. And the next steps are, so Planning Board will be meeting for discussion and on August 3rd, 2020. And this will be part of that discussion on that day. And then bearing a recommendation from the Planning Board, if the Planning Board is comfortable on moving forward on a recommendation on this development, potentially it could be brought forward at Town Council meeting for decision on August 12th, 2020.
And just a reminder that written comments will be received by the town until next Wednesday, which is July the 22nd.
Yes, you can still, write your comments into the planning department, yes, till July 22nd. That's a key item. And I think that's it. So with that, I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it. Under these circumstances, it's not ideal, but I think it's great to get concerns put on the floor. So thank you for coming.
There is a third part.
And there is if you wanted to hang out with us a little longer, there is another section of this public meeting relating to some amendments within our bylaw. It's not exciting, but it's certainly something you could stick around and listen to, but we are going to be airing that and staying here and discussing those amendments in the current bylaw. Otherwise, if you're leaving, I would ask you to leave through this exit, just in case there happened to be someone coming in for this next cycle, but I highly doubt it. What's that? So the question is this it? Will there be any more discussion, like public consultation on this? And what will happen is at planning board, they'll say, either they're gonna feel comfortable with making a recommendation. Well, actually, Kevin, I should have you, I may screw
Sure,
this up.
sure.
You go
No, that's
ahead
fine.
and give them the process.
I mean, the required public meeting, this is the required public meeting. Depending on how planning board and council feel about it, there is the possibility that there could be suggested revisions. If revisions are made to the plan that are considered significant, then there would have to be another public meeting to present those. That's what happened earlier this evening with we had a second public meeting on the Redden Heights, or the Redden Meadows proposal, because it was a significant revision. But if there is no significant revision, then this plan will go forward to planning board and council for a decision.
What's that? So the comment is our goose is cooked, but no, I wouldn't say that, because there's been a lot of feedback brought here tonight, and it'll all be, I saw lots of notes taken over here, so they're gonna take that feedback in, and they could potentially do a design change, which would mean another public meeting. But all that feedback is gonna be considered both by the developers and by the planning board before bearing a recommendation to town council. July 22nd, absolutely. And you can address that to Kevin Reynolds, Director of Planning, yeah?
Yeah, in the letter that you would have received, the directions are there. If you have any issue or you're unsure, just contact the town, and they will get you the contact information to submit your comments to us. Yeah.
One of the comments this gentleman made about making that one property in the backyard of Route 4 on Kinloch Road smaller would be very well appreciated for residents on Kinloch Road, because that would be a 40-foot back into the woods again. So there's something that I think should be looked at.
That right there, Keith.
Just to reiterate, the comment from the floor was just talking about cutting one unit off a 4-unit to make it into a 3-unit. I think that was spoken to earlier, so just saying that would be appreciated. All right, well, thank you, everyone.
Oh,
I guess
my mouse back.
this
Yeah,
is
I'm gonna
adjourned.
just
Go
switch
ahead.
oh, no, I'm just
No, yeah, that's right. We got to keep going.
You get prepped there, Blaine. Yes. Yeah. Just wait though until Jill brings you in. Okay, folks, we'll proceed to the last part of the meeting, which is to discuss some minor amendments to the zoning development bylaw number 45. These are, for the most part, they're text amendments. There is one new insertion of a new clause. So I'll turn it over to our town planner, Blaine Utabi, and he will go through a quick presentation here to outline what the changes are.
Okay, thank you. These are text amendments to the zoning and development bylaw number 45. Just like we're required to have a public meeting for zoning amendments, we're also required for text amendments to the bylaw. So these are 4 minor updates or amendments to update the Town of Stratford zoning bylaw. So they're in section 11.55B of the PURD zone, the planned urban and rural development zone. There's an error in the text. There's some text changes to the R2 and the C2 zone. They're needed to update the bylaw. Insertion of a new section for fence sites in section 8, and a minor text amendment to section 8.14 relating to fences around pools. So the new section is 8.17, and it will state fence heights, and A, the maximum height for a fence in a residential zone shall be no higher than 1.8 meters or 6 feet, and B, the maximum height for a fence in a commercial zone shall be no higher than 2.8 meters or 8 feet. We didn't have these fence heights before. There have been some fences that have been a little too high. Some residences have been bringing it to the town's attention, so we figured it was the best thing to do is to insert this to have some control over fence heights. So if you join a residential zone and you butt a commercial, you can actually go to the same height as the commercial zone. So outdoor swimming pools, currently we have 8.14.1B states a minimum 1.8 or 6 feet high fence shall be constructed in such a manner so as to impede unauthorized persons from entering over or under the fence. We're just eliminating the word minimum. So it's a 1.8 meter or 6 foot high fence. So section 11.3 R2 zone, the lot requirement table for duplex and semi-detached. It's just a small change. It's just we're adding for minimum lot area, standard with municipal sewer, 910 square feet or 9,800, should say actually 910 square meters, sorry, or 9,810 square feet, or 455 square meters or 4,900 square foot per unit, because it was brought to our attention that there is a subdivision of an attached dwelling. When you have a duplex, you want to just create the lot to the minimum size, and the minimum size would be the half. It just didn't have this or 455 or 490 per unit. It was in the previous bylaw, so we figured just to be consistent, we would insert this into the new bylaw. So 11.55 of the PURD zone, Amendment 45B, we actually eliminated section 3, or III, but it was still left in the text, so we just eliminated that. So now it just says notwithstanding subsections I and II above, it no longer says III. So section 11.55, lot requirements, B, I and II of the bylaw to be amended by deleting these words. So we're removing I prior to the development of a preliminary site plan to receive their input prior to the development of a preliminary development scheme. II, council shall require the applicant to submit a detailed development plan review. We figured that we'd replace it with these words. This language is actually plucked out of the bylaw 29A. We feel that it reflects this in a more uniform fashion. So we're replacing the former text with I, council shall require the applicant to submit a detailed development scheme for review, and II, council shall hold a public meeting to inform residents and property owners of the details of such a development scheme and to receive their comments.
Just to clarify there, Blaine, back to the previous slide, we're not deleting the requirement for a public meeting. There's just an error in the text, the way it's read. So we're deleting the 2 sections out and replacing them with the proper wording. So the public meeting is still there to review the development scheme. It was found when one of these latest rezoning applications came forward that there was an error in the text in item number I.
Okay, so section 13, the highway commercial zone, C2. We're actually eliminating I automobile service stations because it was actually in twice. It was in conditional and it was also in the special use. So we're taking that out of conditional, leaving it in special use. So therefore, because we have I and II, since we have only one now, we're changing II, which is commercial dwelling units. Now that it's standing by itself, it's now I, commercial dwelling units. So really, like I said, they're very minor texture amendments, but we did need to, occasionally we have to do such housekeeping amendments and to update the bylaw and bring it up to current standards. So this is what we have here. So if there's any questions, feel free to contact the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Blaine. Any questions?
Oops.
With that,
Any questions online?
Any questions online?
No. Nope, I just checked with Wendy there.
All right. Thank you for coming out. Meeting adjourned.